of executive session, and I'm bringing the regular council meeting to order. There's no action to be taken, and if the clerk will please call the roll.
Councilmember Curtis. Councilmember Shrubnik.
Here.
Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
Councilmember Danuski.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Herbig.
Here.
Mayor Baker.
Here. Okay, guys, sorry, short notice. We're pleased to have Boy Scout Troop 582 here, and I'm going to take advantage of that. If you gentlemen would please lead us in the flag salute.
Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. If there are no changes, the agenda will stand approved as written. The next item on the agenda is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for you to express your views that are important to you and to the community. We are going to have a second comment period before the presentation for Widener and Associates and Lake Point. So if you want to speak about Lake Point in that, then hold those comments until we are at that section. If you have general comments that you would like to make, now is your opportunity. Will the clerk please call the first person?
Vicki Grayland.
Hi, I'm Vicki Grayland, and I live in Kenmore. And I'm here tonight to thank the council for your visionary vote to join the K4C at last week's meeting. I especially want to thank Deputy Mayor Herbig for making the motion. I think that every decision we make from now on has to consider climate change. And in that spirit, I looked at tonight's agenda and I saw the item for the lease for the restaurant, and it included outdoor seating. And I've noticed that outdoor seating often is accompanied by outdoor heating. And outdoor heating is often fueled by carbon-based heaters like propane and other kinds of gas. So these heaters are considered to have such a high carbon footprint that Europe and New Zealand, as far as I know, that's it, have banned that kind of outdoor heater. So I'd like to recommend that at least on city property, we could ban those two and recommend instead infrared heaters that don't have such a high carbon footprint. They're electric powered. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Grayland.
Elizabeth Mooney.
Hi, Elizabeth Mooney, 5934 Northeast 201st Street. I just have two comments about different items than Lake Point right now. One is about the St. Edward Park grassy field. I'm asking that you please save our money and please do not spend it on artificial turf, artificial lights, and please leave it as a grassy field and protect the wetland and the ecology as is there. And then secondly, on the CMEX asphalt industrial site, could you please consider air sampling now to protect our health now? Because I've also learned that they are allowed, and have been for years, to process nuisance soils into their asphalt. Presently, they are not required to test anything that comes out of their stacks. We do not know whether we're breathing things that are toxic. So if you need more voices, then let's get more voices to ask that we deserve to know what that plant is putting out, because they're grandfathered in and they're not up to the modern health standards. So let's make Kenmore healthy now by demanding air sampling now from the CMEX facility. I believe they're leased by the Cal Portland or Cadman people, so it's a complicated situation down there near Lake Point.
Thank you, Ms. Mooney.
Kathy Carr. Is it Leslie McGuire? Okay. Nobody else has signed up, Mayor.
Anybody else wishing to comment during public comments? There will be another period for Lake Point. Seeing nobody else coming forward, Ms. Grayland, Ms. Mooney, thank you all for your comments. And it's something that we certainly will take under consideration. I think it was a unanimous vote last time to join K4C, and so we are very concerned, and we will be definitely looking into it. All right, next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed. Have an issue that Ms. Grayland brought up regarding the lease to the Seaplane Restaurant, and whether we can consider some language that would take into account non-propane or alternative fuel source clean heaters.
I appreciate that, but the motion passes 6-1. Yeah, we could have pulled that before, so next time think of that, Councilmember Marshall, because then we can discuss it. We already voted on it. It's certainly something to bring up, though, at comments, and see if we can do something about it. Next item on the agenda is the draft Lake Point Parameter Agreement. Mr. Hampson, Development Service Director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to give you an update on the project's parameter agreement. Our city manager is here, and he's actually going to kick off the discussion. And Ben Yazici and I will be here for questions and comments.
Thanks, Brian. We've been talking about Lake Point for, well, decades, I guess. But for the last 3.5 years, the city's been in discussions with developer Dean Widener and also the Kenmore community about a potential new development at the 45-acre Lake Point property at the mouth of the Sammamish River and on Lake Washington. Notice I say 45 acres. That's the size of the single parcel of Lake Point. Since then, the developer has acquired additional acreage, so bringing it to a total of about 50 acres. This undeveloped property is the last of its size and kind on the lake and has languished as an underutilized industrial property since a previous developer abandoned development plans for it in the early 2000s. Since then, other developers have come and gone and tried to make a go of it, but have been unable to. The process with Widener and the community continues to move slowly with what we're calling a parameter agreement, which is before they submit any land use applications, as a next step to allow the city and the developer to study and explore a range of potential development options for the site. Any new development on this unique property will be burdened with extraordinary costs, chief among which are pile driving costs to account for the site's soil conditions, as well as mitigation improvements needed for potential traffic impacts. These costs have created a gap in the financial feasibility of the project as confirmed by a third-party analysis provided to the Kenmore City Council in both August and September. You had 2 city council meetings to discuss this third-party financial analysis. And at the meeting in September 11th, you directed us to come back to you with a draft parameter agreement. And so that's what we're doing tonight. To help offset some of the extraordinary costs and also to incentivize development, the city may consider, among other incentives, crediting a portion of future new revenues from the site to help pay for public benefits and infrastructure such as roads, utilities, and parks. This type of incentive is not new and has been used in other cities in the state. In exchange for development incentives, the city will require the developer to provide public benefits and amenities, examples of which are in the parameter agreement before you tonight. Such public benefits and amenities may include dedication of the Lake Point shoreline for public access. This shoreline is currently privately owned and off limits to the public. This shoreline access, if it was granted public access as we're suggesting in the parameter agreement, could include new viewing and direct access points to the water. Other benefits to the public may include providing approximately 8 to 10 acres of new parkland for the public, including the shoreline access, and things like a public amphitheater and a main park. Also, wildlife habitat restoration along the Sammamish River could be provided. Other things such as restaurants, shopping, office space, hotel, affordable housing units, integration and coordination with public transit, including future bus rapid transit. In addition to public amenities and benefits, and despite the financial gap for the developer, our financial analysis concluded a long-term net financial benefit to the city due to Lake Point's addition to the city's tax base, and other taxing districts would also see new revenues such as growth impact fees and property tax over the long term. Lake Point is in the city's urban core, and this is an important point, and Lake Point has been zoned for commercial, both office and retail, as well as high-density residential zoning. This zoning is in compliance with the State Growth Management Act to require cities to accept their share of regional growth and to concentrate growth in downtown urban areas with access to transit and other alternate modes of transportation. As I mentioned previously, the parameter agreement will provide a framework for the developer and the city to study and explore a range of options in order to assess whether a range of residential units, commercial uses, and proposed public amenities may be a good fit for the site and for the community. The parameter agreement before you tonight is in draft form and has not yet been negotiated with the developer. In fact, the first time the developer saw the parameter agreement is when it went live to the internet last Thursday. As a result, the attached draft, the draft you're looking at tonight, will likely change as negotiations proceed and progress. At tonight's meeting, you'll review the draft and provide additional guidance to us on the content of the draft. We anticipate that there will be additional opportunity for public participation as the parameter agreement progresses. The parameter agreement and subsequent permit applications will require the developer to study potential impacts such as traffic, schools, and parking. This process is regulated under the Environmental Policy Act, and it will likely require an environmental impact statement, also known as an EIS. The EIS will, through a public process, study and identify potential impacts to the project and accompanying requirements to address those impacts. impacts such as traffic. The parameter agreement discusses the need to study those impacts and provide mitigations, including impacts and mitigations for affected neighboring businesses as well as traffic. The Lake Point project is still in its early stages and has not yet been designed or studied. Full detailed design and studies will be required by the state, the city, and other agencies. Eventually, if the project exploration progresses, the developer may apply for a land use application for the site, perhaps as soon as late 2019. We actually don't know yet, but that it could be as soon as late 2019. This application process will require all of the traffic, environmental, parking, and other studies necessary for project consideration, as well as more public participation and input. This parameter agreement that you're going to be discussing tonight does not commit the city or the developer to a number of residential units or commercial square footage. Instead, the parameter agreement, when approved, will provide the city and the developer a path forward to study and explore different development scenarios and determine whether those scenarios make sense and can be appropriately mitigated. The City Council should consider and comment on the draft parameter agreement tonight, and you can also accept some public comment tonight as well. What I'd like to do now is just briefly go through a kind of a high-level overview of the parameter agreement and how it's organized, and then I'd like to turn a little bit of time over to Brian Hampson to talk about the timing matrix that he produced, which is also a result of the guidance you gave us at the September 11th City Council meeting. So if you could turn with me to the parameter agreement, attachment 2. So the first page provides background and context. And as well as going on to the next page, on page 2. And then section 3 gives a high-level overview of the range of options we're considering and kind of what we've been talking about generally with the developer to this point. Because of that financial gap that we mentioned earlier, the developer has certain additional requests of the city, as you can see in section 4. And section 5 is a response to those requests. So if the city wants to assist that with the financial gap with a tool such as the tax finance increment tool, the city would have additional requests for the public benefit. So section 5 talks about additional city requests in addition to what's already been discussed with the developer. And then in addition to those requests, section 6 talks about how the developer needs to revisit the project's phasing plan in order to get the financial gap down, and also analyzing a project reduced in density or scale, and also revisit the purchase price of the property and internal rate of return. Section 7 talks about the city's consideration for the project, including possible multifamily tax exemption under RCW 84, park impact fee credits for when the developer builds actual park land for the city, as well as traffic impact fee credits when the developer builds roads on our impact fee list. Section 8 mentions public participation, and Section 9 discusses the current CSTP extension agreement and what's needed for that agreement to continue. Section 10 highlights a traffic analysis, and in particular that we're asking that prior to conducting further design of the project, Widener must conduct a traffic analysis based on the current project parameters. And this analysis must identify potential project mitigation projects both on and off site, and it lists some potential, not hard and fast, but some potential traffic mitigation projects that might be appropriate for the project. Section 11 states that Widener agrees to share their studies and plans and other information they've prepared for the project. Section 12 gives a general timeline. Section 13 talks about a project work group, and Section 14 highlights project impact on neighboring properties and businesses. I'll read Section 14 because I think it's important. The parties acknowledge that SEPA, which stands for State Environmental Policy Act, the state acknowledges that SEPA review and permitting process will acknowledge, review, and address potential environmental and other impacts associated with the project. The parties agree to reasonably conduct studies of the effect and impact of the project on nearby businesses and property, such as the effect and impact of the project on nearby seaplane operations as recognized by the FAA, and to adequately address the effects and impacts to such businesses and property that may be identified in such studies. Size and locations of buildings must be sensitive to and not interfere with Kenmore Air seaplane flight path operations. The rest of the document talks about the date and the term of the agreement, and also what I call the legalese, the severability and the successors and no third-party rights and all those things. So that's a general outline of the draft parameter agreement. At this time, I'd like to turn the time over to Brian to talk about the matrix that I alluded to earlier.
Thanks, Rob. So at the September 11th council meeting, when we brought the HRNA model back to you for the second time, we had a discussion about some high-level items that council would like to see involved in this project. And so we took those, that made a list of those high-level items and created 3 different possible scenarios that these could happen at. And so we used our best judgment to put these into 3 different areas. It could be in more than one, as you can see on some of these. But we specifically went through each one of your comments and put them in some places. And so the ones that are marked in the parameter agreement, we made sure that they actually are into the parameter agreement. And if you have any questions or any disagreements with this, when it's council's time to discuss and consider the draft parameter agreement, would be a good time to also talk about if you would like to change any of the areas that these are talked about.
So we'll get into that, but we have, as soon as staff presentation's done, we will go to public comment. So we will come back for that.
That concludes our presentation for now.
Wonderful. So let's go ahead with staff comment, with public comment on this project. The clerk, I guess, is getting the sign-up sheet and be ready to call the first people. If you'll come forward when your name is called.
Todd Banks.
Hello. May I begin, Mayor? Thank you for allowing us to speak tonight. From the beginning of learning about the Lake Point project about a year ago, from the most recent project, Kenmore learned about it about a year ago, we have made it clear that we are not opposed to any development. We've shared our specific concerns and let you know that we're very concerned about congestion in the takeoff and landing area. We're concerned about access to our docks, which includes the ability to maneuver in the navigation channel. We're concerned about the airspace and for south approaches, and we're also increased about road traffic congestion. A few of these things have been discussed in the parameter agreement, but there are some large things that are still absent from the parameter agreement. Our main concerns can be summarized in terms of compatibility. It seems clear to us that the size and scope of the proposal in front of us includes a description that is incompatible with an airport right next door to it. We shared this in our letter on October 27th in 2017. We shared it again in August 16th, 2018, and then a letter from our attorney on September 17th. The only letter that has been responded to was a letter submitted a year ago, and in the city response, there are statements. There's some nice statements, and the statements are, Kenmore Air is one of the most valued and respected businesses and is a major contributor to the Kenmore's rich heritage. It also says, your concerns about building height, boat traffic, compatibility, and vehicle traffic are valid. This was in the letter. Additionally, under the city's comprehensive plan, there's a goal, T-5.2, that suggests the city needs to plan for appropriate uses and activities in the vicinity to minimize impacts to and from the air harbor. And also, most importantly, there's an RCW, RCW 36.70.547, that requires the city has an obligation to actively discourage incompatible uses adjacent to airports, which is what Kenmore Air Harbor is. Our attorney sent the letter on September 17th, reminding the city of this regulation. This letter remains unanswered, and still we have not had any meaningful discussions with anyone at the city in regard to these compatibility issues. In sharing this, however, we're not saying that these solutions to the issues, that there are not solutions. We feel like there are solutions to these issues. For example, it may be possible to create a protected takeoff and landing area. There are other strategies to mitigate other concerns as well. To date, there have been no discussions, despite our request to hold them, on these particular issues. In the attachment number 3 of the draft parameter agreement, Councilmember Joe Marshall made the suggestion to identify the impacts or mitigation measures for lake traffic to include boating and aerospace traffic. We request and would appreciate this suggestion to be expanded upon and be included in the parameter agreement.
Mayor, we're at 3 minutes. I'll leave it to the council as to how long each person is going to get.
I'm all done.
All right.
I was going to say, we just look forward to future meaningful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Banks.
Art Vala.
Good evening. Thank you for having this public comment period. I attended the last
Can you
meeting.
State your name and city.
Sorry. Art Vala, and I live in Kenmore.
Thank you.
And during the last meeting that I attended, there was no public comment period, and it involved the financial feasibility study, and which was probably appropriate. A couple of questions I have to the presentation that was made at that time. The builder offered 15 acres of parkland. I hear tonight that that's now down to around 8 acres. I'd like to have a response to that. But my main concerns, of course, are traffic mitigation. You're building a brand new bridge across the slough here. It's in process. If we need a larger bridge, is the state going to step forward and provide the huge amount of money it would cost to put another bridge in? Another question that I have for the City Council is, what is the condition of the land? My understanding is that it was previously used as a dump for construction materials, and that there may be a substantial amount of asbestos mixed in with the dirt. If there's going to be a large amount of excavation, is that going to be a problem to people that live adjacent to the site? Another concern that I have is power. Will they have to put in another substation? If another substation is required, where will that substation be located? And generally, that comes with 115,000 volt three-phase power to the substation, and usually that's put on 90-foot tall towers. What neighborhood are those towers going to be located in? And are the neighbors going to be consulted on that? Most of the utilities in a facility like this are underground facilities, sewer, water, what have you. And I'd like to know if, because there is going to have to be excavation for those, how they're going to protect both the workers and surrounding people from any contaminants in the soil. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Vall.
Laura Hodge.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Laura Hodge. I live in Kenmore. I wasn't going to speak tonight. I was going to just keep my mouth shut. But I was at the August presentation, and I did express my concerns at that time, the long-term viability of this project. Given the cost that the city would have to absorb, and given the fact that the building on that land requires so much preparation, that I would personally like to see, and I've talked to others in the community, I would personally like to see that be a water taxi terminal that would support we could have a small retail and restaurant to service the water taxi customers. It would be a transportation alternative for the guests that are be staying at the St. Edward Lodge. They could take a water taxi into Seattle. We have to really think about, things are great in the economy right now, but my biggest concerns is that I'm starting to see housing start slowing down, and usually in cycles, housing is usually the first to start slowing down in sales, and that's usually the prelude to economic slowdown. And frankly, this project is too ambitious. It costs too much to the city. I would rather see that land be put to good use. So the Kenmore community has, they're getting something for their money's worth. So I really urge you folks to proceed with caution. It's an awful big price tag just to even get the land built to suitability. So thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ms. Hodge.
Carrie Graydon.
Hi, I'm Kari Graydon, and I live in Kenmore. I just had a couple of things that stuck out to me. One of them was the proposed plan had somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 multifamily units, like dwelling, apartments or condos or whatever. That's going to impact our schools hugely. And I don't know if this is still this way, but last meeting I was at, I believe we established that there was going to be no school impact fee on dwellings like that. And so I would question if there's going to be an impact fee in this situation where it will definitely affect our local schools. Arrowhead and Morelands, I assume, are the two closest, and they are small schools. This will affect them a lot. I am also very concerned about traffic. I'm glad they're looking into that, but it's bad already. It's really bad already. So I'm very concerned about that. And I also, has been mentioned already, that it would be really great to have some more green space, and having it cut down from 15 acres to 8 acres. Who's to say it won't be 5 or 3 by the time it's finished? I personally agree with Laura. I'd love to see some more green space available. 25-story buildings, not so much. Yeah. Oh, and also Art brought up the power impact with having to power this new place. And I would love for us to maybe encourage the builders to do something a little more green green energy sources. Just thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Graydon.
Bill Scott.
Bill Scott. I'm a Kenmore resident. I just have a question because I haven't looked into this real deeply, and that is whether this will at some point come to where Kenmore voters can vote on it, or if this is not something that we are involved in from that standpoint. It should be pretty simple to answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Mooney.
Hi, Elizabeth Mooney, 5934 Northeast 201st Street, Kenmore. I'm just going to try to look at the document, the 30 pages, and try to go through it that way. But I love all these comments. It just seems like it's too big. I am super disappointed that we seem to be giving bigger breaks to Widener and Pioneer Towing than we even would give to any of us. It's outrageous. And yeah, would it come to a vote? That's a great question. One of the big gaps that I see by looking at this and having dealt with citizens for years about Lake Point, volunteer scientists, is there's no mention specifically of making Widener look for the toxins. I know somebody alluded to the toxins. It's a trash dump. It's a Model Toxics Control Act site, but you all know that, I hope. And if you don't know that, you owe it to the citizens before you give away the farm to Widener and Pioneer Towing and give them tax breaks. Because in 2022, if there are people living on that site, or people boating on that site, or people playing on that site, in my opinion, it makes sense that you have made sure that what's in that soil, that Department of Ecology does not have to test. Department of Ecology only had to test the groundwater because that's what the owner of the property got away with. And that's Gary Sargent and Pioneer Towing. So if you think that everything is safe because on page, let me see, I know I've got 1 minute left, but it says Washington Department of Ecology is giving you an okay or something. I don't have the correct word here because I'm not trying to, but I think there's a gap in full disclosure about the other toxins. It says, like where is the document from Department of Ecology that says we're okay before we spend more and more money on the consultants and all these attachments? This is costing us a lot of money just to keep in the game with Widener. And I have signed up to talk to Widener. I'll help with the public, participation that he has to do. Okay, so another thing on your list, and thank you for holding their feet to the fire, Council. One of the issues that you brought up, Councilmember Marshall, had to do with the impact. But what about surface water? What about noise? What about light? What about impact to the existing wildlife? After you've already built 25-story buildings, on your attachment 3, discharge of stormwater, lighting, noise.
Ms. Mooney, we're at 3 minutes.
Are we allowed more? Because as I recall, really? On comment, on public comments? Okay. Well, thank you to Mr. Hampson, because I called this morning very concerned that this was our last chance, and apparently we have a lot more chances. Seems like a real bad deal at the moment, but thank you for trying.
Thank you, Ms. Mooney.
Daniel, is it Mudry? Oh, I'm sorry.
You've been away too long.
I know, I'm back. So, Dennis Mendry, my wife and I reside at 6410 182nd Street in Kenmore. The clock is ticking. Well, first I want to thank the City Council, the staff, and all those people that are participating in a very, very big deal. I mean, this is something Kenmore has been waiting for 3 decades. And it's very close. And I had a dear father-in-law who shared some great wisdom when dealing with business opportunities and negotiating situations. And he said an individual or all parties should attempt to be fair, friendly, and firm. And I think that there's a gap in the financial piece because all parties are attempting to get to that point, but they have not achieved that goal. And I'll start with the land. The land has been at a price. I don't know what it's been negotiated at this point in this deal, but it has always been at a price that far exceeds its value for being a swamp that was filled, landfill, causing a huge expense in development costs. So the land is not worth unknowingly what the price is being paid. I believe its value. The developer, he wants to do as much and as big as he can to make as much money as he can. That's the developer. But that isn't going to work on this land because the cost to make it big and a huge footprint is astronomical. So to give more to green and to possibly the city encourage higher health? How about higher heights of buildings along stable ground rather than what they're limited to? Because what they have to do steel and concrete anyhow. They have to put elevators in what they've got. If they can go up 3 or 4 more floors, 5 more floors, 6 more floors. Now, some people are freaking, I know. But there's no visual impact to the lake behind Juanita Drive, up that industrial valley. Nobody's going to miss the lake because they can't see it anyhow. Ooh, getting close. So my encouragement is that if all parties really assess what they want to do, they can come to an agreement and reduce the financial gap and give us what we've always wanted, lake access to the public, a place to play and enjoy, and a higher density and a better income. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mendry.
Karen Prince.
Hello, I'm Karen Prince. I live in up by Arrowhead School, Kenmore resident. Basically tonight I share many of the comments and the concerns about this project, but as I was thinking about the September meeting which I came to, and I had a lot of questions and comments. One idea, because I'm a practical person I guess, is I don't really know the lay of the land. And so my request is to the council and to the Widener team, is it possible that you could arrange a walking tour for people like me? And I'd be happy to sign a waiver that if I tripped and fell, I wouldn't sue anybody. So that would be really helpful to see what is exactly where this is. Mayor Baker showed me a map Saturday at the meeting I went to, the coffee. So I'd love to see a map. Maybe it's online. But basically, I would love to take a walking tour, and maybe there would be some other people that would be interested. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prince.
And I'm glad we have more opportunities to follow this project.
Thank you.
Patrick O'Brien.
Pat O'Brien. I live here in Kenmore. I'm going to shock you. I'm totally in favor of Lake Point because anything is preferable to the asphalt and concrete plant. They still fudge on their hours of operation. I wake up with headaches. They've got some sort of winter waterproof mix going that will absolutely give you a headache like you won't believe. I mean, it's terrible. When I'm smelling Chinese food from Tai Ho, life is good. Otherwise, life is bad with the asphalt plants coming to the front door. I'm telling you right now, it's bad. All right, so from the Morrison building, the old concrete building here, you used to be able to throw a vodka bottle off the back porch and hit the lake. So it wasn't always swamp. It was Lake Washington, and I got that directly from the guy I bought my house from, Fast Eddie Lunn, who worked as the accountant at Morrison Building. And I bought my house from him, and he told me all the old stories. Yeah, we had 2 martini lunches. We'd throw the bottle out in the lake. Splash! Hey, another successful lunch. All right, so we go on now, and I did a first reading. The venue in your document, I believe, is incorrect. I believe the venue is State Supreme Court, since there's already State of Washington versus Pioneer Towing, and I believe that has precedent over the King County Superior Court. So you might check that. I would love to know what the ongoing cost is to the city for development. I would love to see what is permissible under FAA rules to proximity of an international airport on building height. So the cut, as it were, is used for Kenmore Air, and you've got a certain restriction. I believe it's 50 feet, can't be over 50 feet, a certain number of feet from that site. So that's going to be critical. I also read where you're going to have low-cost housing in that development, and I don't know where else on the planet you can be really poor and live on the waterfront, except for Sandpoint. And no comment on what Seattle's doing. So I also found exception to the city may waive any requirement. Well, that's a pretty good rule. I wish I had that in my life. And then the last point, I've got just enough time, is nobody has talked about liquefaction of fill material in an earthquake zone, which we are, and nobody's talked about the 8 to 15 foot height differential between Lake Sammamish and Lake Washington. There is a dam on Lake Sammamish, and if it lets go, then you're going to see the whole surface of Lake Sammamish come down the slough. And I don't know if that's an earthen dam or what it is, but that ought to be part of your study, because if that lets go and people live there, they're going to go swimming. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
Mayor, there's nobody else signed up.
Anybody else wishing to speak about Lake Point? Mr. Lake, if you'll please sign the papers afterwards.
My name's William Leake. I live here in Kenmore. I served on the 1994-1998 task force before Kenmore was a city. It was a rather arduous but interesting assignment. All I have to say tonight is there's a lot of interesting ideas that have come out of this whole process this last year. And my advice is to keep on going and get it right. Get it right for all parties, and it'll be a great thing. But if you can't get it right, it's not going to be a good thing. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Leake. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am, you'll need to go sign up after you speak.
Oh, I already put you in there, sorry.
This makes me nervous. Just a brief comment.
Your name, please.
I'm Rosie Schaefer. I reside in Kenmore by the lake, but not by the lake. I'm really excited about the possibility of development in Kenmore, looking forward to it. I do have concerns, especially about traffic, because I currently feel I sometimes take my life in my hands turning onto my street off of Juanita Drive just to get home, especially during heavy commutes. So I'm hoping the traffic study in relation to the project can be done sooner rather than later, and just to get issues that related to that addressed. And the other thing I want to say is I appreciated the comments about Kenmore Air. I think Kenmore Air in this city is one of the coolest things there is, and I've thought that ever since I moved here. And, it's one thing that Bothell can't say they have Kirkland or Bellevue. And so I'm really hoping that, we definitely address their concerns and keep them as a business here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. If you could please go up to the clerk and sign that, that'd be great. Anybody else? Anybody else wishing to be heard?
Mayor, can I make one comment? I just received a note. If your license plate's 286 VKP, your lights are on outside.
286 VKP.
286 VKP.
Lights are on.
I think it might be mine. I might need to go.
He's teasing. Your car won't start after this meeting, so we'll find out who it is.
Is it a Mini Cooper? Yes. Yeah, it's a red Mini Cooper.
Aha! The culprit is located. That's 30 minutes up till 5 o'clock.
I thought this meeting was only going to be 30 minutes long.
Thank you all for your comments. Mr. Valley, you had a lot of comments there, and I'm sure somebody can get back and get those answered. There's a lot of issues. We're just starting this process. There are lots of things that we don't know. And we certainly appreciate the comments. A couple of things, just for clarification, that's private property owned by Pioneer Towing that is being developed by a private company, Widener Apartment Homes, and we are the permitting agency, and we are really concerned. We want to make sure this is done right with the permits, and that's our sole responsibility is permitting. Ferry is very much in play. We are still in negotiations with the county to get a passenger-only ferry here in Kenmore, and it is a real possibility. So we are working on that. No, this won't go to a vote of the people because it's private property, and we are just going to be issuing permits. If they meet our code, then they get their permits. So that's just a big picture. But there's lots of things that we want to make sure are done right. So that's why the starting of this parameter agreement, but nothing is cast in stone. We are just starting this process, and you know probably about as much as we do at this point, but we're going to be learning. So I thank you all for your comments. I do thank you all for being here tonight. It shows that you have interest in your community and what's going to happen in the future, and trust me, we are just as concerned about traffic and other issues as you are. So, because we live here too, and we have to drive these same roads. So with that then, Councilmember Curtis.
So I always like to start with the high-level view, make sure I'm on the right path with everybody. So here's what I believe to be true. I do have a bunch of details, and I want to wait, and I'll do that probably in order or however we choose to do that. But at the high level, citizens want access to the water, and the only entity that can give Lake Point access is the owner of the property. There are high development costs due to geotech issues requiring buildings to be put on piling, and there are costs due to past environmental contamination. There's about a $200 million deficit, and but despite that, I don't think Kenmore citizens want this to be an industrial site forever. I believe there is an interest in Lake Point being developed into something that benefits our community. This will require a public-private cooperation. How can we decrease costs together, so the public and the private, because any increased cost to the developer will ultimately affect the deficit, which affects the viability of the project and the future of Kenmore. I sort of see this parameter agreement as it's not a development agreement. It's a high level, did we get everything? Did we miss something important? It's just a checklist of topics. And so that's why it looks kind of big. And some of these we may say, oh, we'll take them off. And there's actually one I would like to add. I couldn't find it here, but just that we need to deal with the dissent decree. I think it's maybe so obvious we didn't think to put it in here, but I think it should be listed as somewhere in this agreement. And that's my high-level things, and then like I say, when everybody else gets a chance, we can get into details.
All right. Councilmember Smith.
I have a question. How do you want to proceed? Because I too have things, but I don't want to waste time with.
No, and right now we are on council discussion and direction.
Okay, so do you want to start with the first section, or how do you want to proceed?
Yeah, doing it in order, I think will be good.
So if that's all right, then I'm going to jump right in.
Jump right in.
Okay. So my question or my concern is under background and context, H. And I would like us to add the following. At the end of that, where it finishes up with HRNA alternative, I'd ask that we add the verbiage or something similar to: the study did not analyze a diminished or scaled back project scope. The city may pursue further analysis with a reduced project scope. And my reasoning for this is that I believe the study, the HRNA study, was incomplete. It analyzed 3 options: the CSDP, Widener's plan, and an increased project scope in order to take advantage of economies of scale. However, because of the extraordinary site improvements that are necessary and outlined in the pro forma, it is possible that a diminished scope would reduce the financial gap and increase the viability of the project. Also, any diminished scope analysis should exclude the site purchase price from the study. Because why would a pro forma include a 20% IRR on a purchase price that is shown to lack financial viability? And it's important that we are not fixated solely on the options presented in the HRNA pro forma, but to be flexible and open to alternatives. And this is necessitated by the massive scale of the project as well as the immense gap that requires public funds. And so I think if we at least add that sentence to H, what we've done is it allows us to simultaneously, as Widener's working on their plans, if we have things we want to do as well, to try to feel that we may believe to be necessary in scaling back the gap or the scope that I think it benefits the whole project.
So you want to give the clerk how you want H to
Sure.
read?
Mayor, can I comment on that before you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which version are you looking at the top of your page?
Wow.
What do you see?
So I'm looking at the one that was in a binder.
Okay, so that was a previous version, and the one that was published includes that language.
Almost.
Almost.
So
includes
I'm
some-
happy with that language.
So you're happy with the language on H?
Yeah.
Can you scroll up to the top of the page? Because it says
10, 17, 18.
18 version.
Well,
That's different than in
that's what
ours in our
mine says
books.
too, 1017. So
I'm going to have to put the time of the day I edit these, it looks like.
Yes.
okay, so just let me look at this. Just it's absolutely in the essence it does, and so I'm happy with that.
You're happy with H? Okay. Councilmember Marshall.
Question then, if those are updated, could we have copies under this updated if there are other changes?
Yeah, now I'm concerned because I have a number of notes that are based on the copy I have in my binder.
Right.
So anyway, we'll find out.
So
I think this is the only difference between the copy and your binder versus the one that was published on the website.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
So if you do copies, since we do have a notebook on this, but we also have it in electronic form, it might be good that our notebooks are kept
up to date.
So
after
that we're looking
tonight,
at the same thing.
Yep.
Because I realize I am old-fashioned. I want to turn pages with paper, and so I rely on the paper more than electronic. So
great point. If you leave your binders with Rob, we can make sure that they get updated after tonight's edits.
Okay. And anybody else with something on this background? Councilmember Shrubnik.
No, that's a later section.
Okay, so let's then move forward to the agreement part. Any change on the agreement part?
You might want to do sections, maybe section 1, section 2, section 3.
Okay, then let's move on to, we're still on attachment 2. Section, 3, I guess.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
I
go
do
ahead.
have a comment, but I know some others do too.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
A comment under agreement number 3. I would strike the language that is the second line there, starting with intended and ending with plan, so that it reads, the following description of the project is conceptual in nature and may be modified in the permitting and approval process, et cetera. I don't think we know enough at this juncture to say that it meets both the P suffix and the comp plan requirements.
All right, so you want to run that by one more time?
Sure, I would strike the language under 3 that's of the first sentence that starts with is and ends with plan. So the word project goes right into is conceptual.
Okay. Councilmember Danuski, on that, since we're discussing that.
Yes, on that. I guess my concern, if we remove that language, is I feel like A through T is trying to tell us what kind of is within the P suffix and comprehensive plan, or at least that's kind of how I understood that. Kind of like the Central Park, approximately 10 acres or 20% of the property area is like something that the P suffix is required. So I just wonder if we take those words out, have we changed the assumptions that we've used to do A through T? And that's kind of more of a question for Brian.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'm concerned that removing references, especially to the P suffixes, might undermine our bargaining position in the grand scheme of things as we go forward.
Councilmember Smith.
Likewise, I think that the P suffix requirements are unique in our zoning code, and I think by having them specifically called out, it's addressing that we value them and they are there for a reason.
Councilmember Curtis.
Yeah, I'm inclined to keep them in because it says the goals and the intent are to meet the P suffix conditioned and comprehensive plan. So without going into all the detail, it says they're important to us. We don't want to forget any of that stuff.
So
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Probably misstated then what the intent of the deletion is. I absolutely want to ensure that we meet the P suffix and comp plan requirements unless we explicitly change those for this agreement. And that's actually the reason that I suggest removing it, because these things actually do not necessarily, as we've discussed and with the materials that Brian showed us, meet all of the requirements. So I want to make sure that when we get to our agreement that we do meet those. So maybe there's some other language that expresses that sentiment better.
Councilmember Danuski.
A suggestion for Councilmember Shrubnik is how about if you change the word meet to address? To address the goals and intent of the P suffix and comprehensive plan instead of meet.
I think it's
or
I don't know.
Councilmember Smith.
Or intended to meet or exceed the goals and intent. So if you just added the words or exceed after the word meet,
Councilmember Marshall?
I had.
Councilmember Curtis?
So I think later in that section, it talks about including but not limited to development agreement process. So I would understand this to be, here's a list of things. It is not the full P suffix or comprehensive plan requirements. It's just a list of stuff that we're talking about now. So maybe you want something more clear that the P suffix, it may be a separate sentence, the P suffix and comprehensive plan requirements will be met. So, but instead of trying to blend it into one sentence,
Right, exactly.
just pull it out, make it a separate sentence.
Deputy Mayor?
No, sorry, I was just
I trust staff will figure out wording that's the intent of what we're trying to get
Okay,
at.
so the one that I heard here is the following description of the project is intended to meet or exceed the goals and intent of both the P suffix conditions and the comprehensive plan. No, okay.
It's the pairing of this list with the idea that it meets the requirements. And
Right.
I think staff can figure out how to
Figure it out.
extricate those two things so that we get the list and the intent.
I'm not particularly clear on what exactly that looks like, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Well, the intent is to meet the conditions. We don't know enough about this list and everything else to say that it does. So those are two different.
Right, but I'm talking about language on here, like how, I'm not sure if I followed Councilmember Curtis's suggestions for language.
So I think they're two separate concepts. And I think what Councilmember Shepherd is saying is they're now put together in one section. And to call them out specific and say, here's a bunch of issues we're going to talk about. But then as a separate, either line item or a separate section, say we will meet the goals and intent of both P suffix conditions and the comprehensive plan. This implies, because they're all in number 3, that this is the full extent of the comprehensive plan and the P suffix, and it is not.
Okay.
They're not the same thing, and they're being mixed together in one section.
Councilmember Smith?
Can I make one other alternative option that may help? How about if we said the following description of the project is intended to meet the goals of the community, the P suffix conditions, and the comprehensive plan?
With a period instead of a comma after the plan?
Well, but it says the following, so it's referencing.
It's still linking it to the
Yeah,
rest.
that's
Yeah,
the problem.
okay.
Okay.
Does the staff understand? It seems like it shouldn't be that hard to just take those two concepts and put them in two different numbers.
So we know that the project can't meet the P suffixes.
But that's our goal, is to at least address them all.
I don't see a issue with taking that out and leaving it like the following description of the project is conceptual in nature. That sentence was put in there just to generally explain that the project itself is intended to meet the community goals and visions and the council's visions and code requirements. So this is really a high-level document. It doesn't need to really get that far into the weeds. I think it would probably be best if we just take out that middle part of the sentence.
That's one way to solve it.
Can I suggest something, see if that meets the Councilmember Shrepnick's concern? The following insert general description of the project is required to meet goals and intent of both P suffix and comprehensive plan, and it continues. So you're stating that it is required to meet P suffix conditions and the comprehensive plan.
Required would help, yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll put something together in that regard.
Okay, we got that. Anything else in this section?
I have something.
Councilmember Smith.
On 3H.
Park and other public spaces?
Yeah, I just want to make sure if the clerk could scroll up so I want to make sure it hasn't changed on me since last time I read it.
We I'm testing you.
What I would like to suggest is that where it refers to approximately 10 acres or 20% of the property, that change to approximately 15 to 18 acres or approximately 30% of the property area in locations. And my reasoning on this is 20 acres is the approximate amount covered of public space that was in the original CSDP. And since the financial analysis informs of the gap, one of the greatest public benefits that we can achieve is the public open space. The requirement of necessitating public funds to close the gap also means we need to look at a higher level of public benefit. At approximately 50 acres, well, I'll take off 5 acres that was not part of this but included because Widener has purchased it. But at 45 acres, 20% is about 9 acres. Well, of that, 8.3% is buffer between the river setbacks and the lake setbacks. And in the P suffixes, it's already required that there be a linkage already around the outside. So although the public doesn't own it now, it's required in the P suffix already. And so I don't believe that should be included, especially if it's included at about 83% of the total open space requirement. So what I would suggest is that we increase that requirement knowing that we have a significant gap to close and we need significant public benefit to align with it.
Councilmember Danuski.
Thanks. So just so everybody noticed, the word central is in your binder and not on the new version. But so that was going to be my comment as well, as far as I've heard from the public. Open space, park space is really right up there, number one, for a public benefit. So I was going to suggest saying at least 10 acres, but I would support Councilmember Smith's suggestion.
Deputy Mayor.
Or greater than 10 acres.
Yeah, I agree with what Councilmember Smith said.
And I guess I would like to see something in here, since we're talking about this open space and park space. I guess I would really like to see something in here where we could include some ball fields. And I'm not sure whether this is the exact place to put it, but since we're talking about park and open space, I think it might be. But I can leave that to you, Mr. Hampson.
Well, we're going off the direction, so if you agreed to put something in here, we need to know.
Well, I'd like to see ball fields included in this, and certainly in the open space. Councilmember Curtis.
It seems like that's a detail that might go in a development agreement, but at this parameter level agreement, just to call it open space or public space seems more appropriate.
Councilmember Smith.
I would support that wholeheartedly, and if we're specifically calling out other items to do with waterfront access and boathouse and amphitheater, I don't think it's unreasonable to at least consider it as an item within the parameter agreement to be considered. And we don't know how it's going to be designed. We don't know the layout, but I think of open space, but I think that it would be nice to at least have it documented in there, and I would absolutely support it. And also, if you get a chance, if you go through the pros plan for the park recreation open space plan, it specifically addresses these, and I've got some highlighted issues if you want to see it that play right into exactly why this is a perfect example of a public-private opportunity in partnership that is in one of the few remaining places that we could possibly have something. And so I think it's at least exploring and it should be called out.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to adding verbiage, to adding ballparks, but we would actually, I think, need to add it because the way it's worded right now, it's talking about specific things and then passive enjoyment areas. And ball fields, I don't think really fall within any of the definitions that are there. So I think if we want to do that, then we should add specific language.
Councilmember Marshall, you're looking, and Councilmember Curtis, I'll come back to you. You've already spoke on this.
Okay. This is to 3B. I'd propose range of to go in front of the word buildings, range of buildings up to 7 or 8 stories in height, so that we know that there's multiple heights and not uniformly just 7 and or 8 story high buildings. And also for C, range of from roughly 1,000. I'd add the word roughly before 1,000 to be consistent with at least our expectation of a that reduced or scaled down proposal that we've asked Widener to review.
So we want to get approval on these, so let's stick with changes, I think, on H, and then we can move to the ones on C and whatever. Let's come to agreement. Councilmember Curtis.
So I'm having a little trouble sorting out 5B open space with 3H. So I'll give my comments here because it seems like they apply in both places. So my thought is, what I've heard from the citizens is they want access to the water. They say there's this huge park out there, there's this huge land out there that we can't get to the water. And I guess I haven't heard that many people say, I must have a central park, or I must have a park at a certain location. They want to get to the water. We're in a unique location for water sports, water activities, water enjoyment, and we can't get there. So for me personally, and I know other people feel very different than I do, I don't really care about the size and location. To me, that's fairly optional. I just want access to the water so our citizens can get there.
Councilmember Danuski.
I think we're mixing a whole bunch of topics that we should probably finish one before we move on to another.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'd like to do.
My comment is, I feel like we need to finish H, and if ballparks or something we want to add in section 5, then we add it in section 5 and talk about it there. Although it is a little odd. I still haven't completely figured out the difference between section 3 and section 5, but it seemed like extra things are in section 5.
Can I explain that?
Yeah.
Section 3 is more what we've been hearing from the developer of the size and scale that they're thinking about. And Section 5 is, if they're asking for additional things from the city, any kind of financial gap or reduced code requirements, Section 5 would be things that they would have to do in addition to the project parameters. So Section 3 is, here's the project parameters. Section 4 is, in order for us to do this, Widener would need some concessions from the city. Section 5 is, if that's what you're going to need from the city, then here's some items that you can consider.
So does increasing park size belong in section 3 or section 5?
Increasing the park size would be in section 5. This is, the developer's kind of saying currently that there's about 10 acres or 20% of open space that's going to be public and given to the city and the citizens afterward. Section 5, where it talks about the open space, is saying that this central park or this big park needs to be relocated towards the tip of the peninsula. And so in that area, we could put something and increase the size of the park from 10 acres to X or whatever percentage you're agreeing to, and including ball fields.
You see, I guess I envisioned the ball fields more in the central portion of the area. Councilmember Smith.
Well, if I think so, we're a little bit mixing a couple of things. So I mean, if we're going to talk about just open space and recreation space, that can be one, and maybe it's in H here where it's addressing the percentage. But my fear is if this is what the builder or the developer wants, then, and that's part of, because it's under this section titled agreement, well, then what that does is that by default that puts everything else down line from this as a city want and I would rather it be known up front that it's not just a city want, it's a city need. And it's a city need because of the extraordinary cost that we're trying to fill. And so that's why I would say at least this 10% or this 10 acres or 20% is inadequate in H, because that's what would be required even if it was a feasible project. So I would suggest we change, if we want to keep it simple then on H, maybe, because it does say or other public open space, ball field could fall within that, so we can address that later in the next section. But maybe in H, we at least increase the total to 15 to 18 or so acres, and which roughly gets us around a 30% mark.
Can I offer something?
Yes.
So this is a draft of a parameter agreement, and rather than decide on which section something goes in, all I really want tonight is your direction. So if you want ball fields in there, just tell me you want ball fields, and we'll figure out where it goes.
Well,
and same with park expansion. If you want an expanded park, we'll figure out where it goes. But we've got a long night ahead of us, and to be fiddling about which section is the appropriate wording, I think.
Well, with all due respect, it's important, because one says city requests, and city requests is different than what we've already reached to an agreement. So that's why where it's placed actually is relevant in the contract.
All I'm asking is for your high-level direction on things you want.
So I would make a motion that we change if that's what you need. I don't know how you want it, but I would suggest we change that to 15 to 18 acres as a range. And so I guess unless there's objection, we can make that change.
Anybody object to that change to 15 to 18 acres? Councilmember Curtis.
So I realize we're trying not to be too detailed of where things go, but I guess my thought would be we could leave the agreement part the same, and then if we want more space, put that in 5 under open space and be more specific what we want.
I wouldn't support
And the reason is because it's of all these extraordinary costs and the money the city's going to have to help find to this project to work at all.
I understand.
I guess I'm happy with letting staff figure out where it goes. Councilmember Shrubnik.
Well, similar. My understanding of 3, and I think Brian underscored that, was 3 is the listing of things that have already been discussed by Widener, informally presented by Widener in his presentations. 5 is where we're expressing our desires that go above and beyond that. So, I mean, I would definitely agree with Councilmember Smith of the desire to have the 30% or additional acreage, but just letting staff figure out, which section that makes more sense potentially in 5.
Okay, so I guess what we're considering then is 15 to 18 acres. Staff can figure out where to put it. Anybody objecting to that? Councilmember Marshall.
Comment just at least to support Councilmember Smith. It's just because the project parameters and assumptions appear to apply to both parties. Obviously, it's the intention. Intention is met, and of course, it being an agreement, it's the intent of both parties. It's not just a reflection of what Widener desires. So I just support Councilmember Smith in that respect.
Okay, so we're back to this. Are we in agreement that we want 15 to 18 acres? I'm not seeing anybody dissenting. Staff can figure out where to put it?
No, I think it should be an H.
I'll second that.
I'm just telling you that's where I believe it belongs.
And I'll second that. I think you made a motion.
Okay, so we got 2 for Section H. Anybody else want Section H, or the rest of us let staff decide it?
Do we actually have to vote on the motion on the floor?
I don't know that it's...
Well,
is it a motion?
Yeah, I didn't hear it as a motion, but you want it as a motion? Let's make it as a motion. Okay, so motion on the table then is to make that change 15 to 18 acres from 10 is in Section H.
We have a second.
And we have a second from Councilmember Marshall. Okay. Do we want to do this with voice vote, or do you want to do a roll call?
Roll call.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Danuski.
No.
Councilmember Curtis.
No, and my comment would be I would like staff to put it where the two pieces, I think. would be
Councilmember
logical.
Marshall?
Yes.
Councilmember Shrebnick?
No.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herpig?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Fails 4-3.
All right.
3-4, excuse me.
So, then, given that, there will be an increase in size from 15 to 18 acres from 10. Staff will determine where to place it. Anybody objecting? Okay. You got that?
We got it. We're going to put it.
Wonderful.
I was going to make a bad joke, but I figured not to. We better just move
Well,
along.
I'm sure we can extend this out for quite a long time. All right.
I heard the word ball fields. Are we doing
Yes,
ball
ball
fields?
fields. So is everybody in agreement that ball fields needs to be put in here somewhere?
I don't agree.
Councilmember Curtis.
I don't agree.
You don't agree. Everybody else agree. Councilmember Danuski.
I don't necessarily agree. I could maybe live with a wording that's like consider putting ball fields or adding ball fields or something looser, but I don't know about requiring it. I'd rather see the open space be for the general public.
Okay, so we got 2 against having ball fields included. Councilmember Shrebnick.
I have a, I guess, clarifying question, just given Councilmember Danuski's comment about requiring ball fields. I think it would be part of the list. That's my understanding.
Part of the list. Yes.
So,
As an option.
as an
Yes,
option.
but
Not a
including
requirement.
ball fields.
Right.
So now you're
I
a
could
yes.
accept that.
So now you're a yes.
There's a
Okay.
difference between require and
Well,
option.
yeah, I mean, some things in here are pretty cut and dry, and some of them are more wishy-washy. So if the word consider was in there, I would be okay with it.
Okay. So we're in agreement with that one. Mr. Hampson.
I got it. Is that in addition to the 15, or is that included in the 15 to 18 acres? It can
Included.
Part of that 15 to 18
Part of
acres
that
can be
15 to 18
put a
would be-
ball field. Okay.
I don't agree that it would be part of the 15 to 18 necessarily,
Okay.
Okay.
but yeah, that's. Yeah, do we need to actually specify if it's part of that at this point?
I don't
Say
know
that again,
we
please.
do.
Would we
We're
really
just
need to
trying
specify if the ball fields would be part of that 15 to 18 at this point, or can we leave it higher level for right now?
Well, maybe we could leave it at higher level to say, provide 15 to 18
We'd like to
acres.
see
And
ball fields
We
included.
consider ball fields.
say that again?
We'd like to see ball fields included
No, and consider ball fields.
somewhere. What?
And consider ball fields.
Well, see, I'm not happy with consider. Either we're going to ask that ball fields be put in or we're not. And I think we should be asking at this point, since it's high level and initial, that ball fields be added. I mean, you've got to have negotiating points here, and to say consider is not a negotiating point. Councilmember Curtis.
I guess I would argue that if we did in fact get the higher acreage, then that would be a give on their part. So our citizens would get more value. And how we decided with whether it's a ball field or something else, I'm just not sure that I know enough what's going to benefit our citizens to commit ourselves at this early level.
Yes, Councilmember Danuski.
So the other thing is, if you just say, put in ball fields, what does that mean? Does that mean they're going to allow some of the land to be used as ball fields that the city would build? Does that mean that Widener has to build them? Does that mean, I don't know, there's a whole range that hasn't been discussed at all that isn't clear to me.
Which I think would come later, but, I mean, we just get the ball fields included in there. But
maybe
anyway.
it's something like explore the option, and then it allows some flexibility in the discussion. I mean, I think it makes sense, and I would love to have required, but I do think we know so little. There's so many things we don't know that I do think it does become a little more difficult to try to put a definitive statement in. But I fully support putting it in there somehow. So is that do we have any level of agreement here? Or
I don't think we do yet. So, I mean, considering is...
Would you support that, Mayor?
What's that?
Milton said or Councilmember Curtis said he would support exploring the option of ball fields or how ball fields could...
Exploring, yes, that's just more than considering.
Right, it allows, it actually tells us we have to...
Right, it's a different word.
Okay. So is that agreeable?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Staff have...
So explore the idea of ball fields in there.
Put that in the appropriate section.
In the appropriate section.
Okay, we'll get
It's going to be a long night.
It's going to be a really long night. And we're quitting at 10. Okay. Where are we going? Okay, Councilmember Marshall, you had two on B and C.
Okay. On B, I'd propose putting in range of before buildings comports with the next three items with their range from a range of buildings, just to represent that there is, in my understanding, there is to be a range of buildings. Yes?
There is going to be a range of buildings, but there could be some shorter, like 2-story and 3-story buildings. So this was just more sort of what we're hearing about the maximum height is 7 to 8 stories. And so...
But I think adding that word adds to the clarification.
Range?
Range.
Like the next three.
But I don't know that range should be 7 or 8. It should be range from 1 to 7 or 8.
Good point.
Well, what if we said a maximum range of up to 7 to 8
up
stories?
to.
A maximum range.
Range up to 7 to 8.
Councilmember Marshall?
Well, and good point from the mayor. I like the idea of the range being comprehensive. Range from, if it was 1 story, to the maximum. To a maximum. We can include both.
Well, that would make sense. So
1 to
range
7
from
and
1
8.
to... Pardon?
1 to 7 or 8.
Okay, that would do it. Thumbs up? 7 thumbs up?
I don't see anybody against this one. Yes, sir, Deputy Mayor.
I mean, I'm not opposed to changing this. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's clear enough as it is, but if everybody else wants to change it, that's fine with me.
I agree.
Okay, we happy then with C, D, E, and E.
And then I had C was range from roughly 1,000 to 1,600.
We want roughly in there. And we want roughly then on D and E?
Yes, that makes sense.
For consistency.
Good catch, yes.
All right, so nobody's having heartburn? Councilmember Smith.
I have something I'd like to add as U down at the at the bottom of this.
Well, let's
list.
finish with
Right.
B, C, D, and E. We've finished with B and C. Are we leaving D and E alone?
No, roughly.
Roughly. So C, D, and E are going to be roughly is added, right? Range roughly from.
Anywhere there's a range, we'll put roughly in there.
Roughly.
It's not crucial to me, but I'm okay with it.
Okay. Now, we are done with A, B, C, D, E. Anything with F? Anything with G? H is done. Anything? Okay, where are we at? Where's the next one in here? Somebody's got a concern with Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I
go
would
for it.
actually. So, if you scroll down to the bottom, I think it should finish at T.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I would add U, and I would add basically this sentence, or sentences. Heavy industrial use has terminated at the Lake Point site, and then area to be defined, because I realize there is a small area that has not terminated. Heavy industry is no longer a legal nonconforming use of the property, and the underlying zoning of the site shall direct future uses of the site. My reasoning is that I just feel like in order to have productive negotiations and reliable outcomes from both parties, we must start from a mutual understanding of what the current site is, the current site zoning, and the highest and best use of the site. Without a foundation built on the legal facts, then this agreement kind of sets itself up for failure. And the legal use of the property should not be a negotiable item. Since operating as a legal nonconforming use for heavy industry, the site has had documented violations and the city has spent considerable resources on issues surrounding the legal nonconforming uses at the site. During the KGM demo project, our code was violated, and KGM and the site owner actually sued the city. Our code clearly states that nonconforming uses cannot be expanded, nor can new industrial uses be initiated. Years ago, it was determined that heavy industrial uses at this site were not in the long-term best interest of Kenmore. Simply put, you cannot compel the city to acquiesce in negotiations because of the threat of an illegal and alternative use. This needs to be documented in the parameter agreement. And so, and this really results partially from what Mr. Widener said in front of us in August when he even mentioned it. And the fact he even mentioned that tells me that he considers it still to be a viable use, and it isn't. And so I think it should be under the terms of agreement in here.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you in a second. Deputy Mayor.
Well, just a thought, listening to your suggestion there, I would almost think that fits better under the first area, background and context, rather than under the agreement, because I think that as far as we're concerned, this is settled. And the background and context is very much about kind of settled facts that we can all, that is background. And I think it would fit in well there.
That's perfect, because I actually would put it then under item J on page 2, because I actually considered putting it there, but I have no problem with that. I just think it needs to be a significant call out in this document so that it is not used as a tool to slap our hand every time we raise an issue.
No, and I agree with you completely. I think we do need to call it. I think it's a really good catch. I was just tossing that out there to see what staff's thought was on where it might fit best into the agreement.
Okay, so you want to read that to me again? What
So
you want J or U to say?
So I would either put it under U as a new one, under 3. Otherwise, I'd go back and put it under the background and context as item J.
Yep.
And the words I had, and I'm not an expert on this, but I just put heavy industrial use has terminated at the Lake Point site, and then I put in parentheses area to be defined, because I realize there is a small area that is still being used. Heavy industry is no longer a legal non-conforming use of the property, and the underlying zoning of the site shall direct future uses of the site. And as a non-conforming use, they're not legal.
I'm just trying to stop at what you're going to include. Okay, I want to make sure that somebody has got that.
Is that?
Or if you've got it written down, that you can give it to her.
I can give you, I've got a page that has it.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
If I may, given the context of this and the comments made by Councilmember Herbig, I would suggest that this language be a term of the agreement, not just a recital. So that the parties are agreeing, and that includes Widener, that the uses, heavy industrial is no longer conforming use, and the parties agree that those uses are not going to be included within the development project.
So I guess that's where I was going next, is if you've got the exact language, so the clerk has got it, then staff and the city attorney can determine where the best place to stick it is, if everybody's in agreement with that.
I saw heads nodding that it should be in the agreement.
I'm seeing heads nodding too.
Thank you.
But there's always been one, so I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. This is your last chance to say no or hold your peace. Okay, so that language will be added at the appropriate place determined by our staff. All right, next one. We're still, I believe, on section 3, unless we're already done with 3 and want to move to 4. I take it we're done with 3 and we want to move to 4. Okay, so we're now on 4. And 4 is just one sentence, or one paragraph. If nobody's got any problems with 4, then we'll move to 5.
Quick question.
Okay,
What's TMA?
Transportation Mitigation Agreement?
Maybe that could be written out, if that's the first time we've seen it in the document.
I think it was earlier.
Oh, was it defined somewhere earlier, and I just forgot it?
I remember reading it too.
Yeah, in background and context in D, it's defined.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else in 4? Everybody's happy with 4? We're moving to 5. Here's where the fun comes. Okay. So there's a number of things in 5 with city requests that we want in or we don't want in. So
Go from the top?
go from the top is probably the best. A is the excess project components and provide any project components that are in excess of the requirements of city provisions and development regulations and P suffixes. Yes. Councilmember Danuski.
I have no idea what that actually means.
Thank you.
There we go.
It tells me nothing. So I guess that's my problem with that one.
Yes.
I don't know what that means.
Second that.
It's basically saying provide anything in excess of what the codes would require that we haven't listed on this list.
I say we remove this one.
Remove it or make it so people can understand
I
it.
don't even, yeah.
I think it's too vague to even have in here. Just to say we can want anything we want at any time we want it, and we don't care anything about cost or anything whatsoever, that's just too vague to have in any kind of agreement
it's
that
really-
anybody could be expected to agree to.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it was really meant for just something for the developer to have, like here's some, just, it wasn't for us to come up with, anything crazy to put in there, but.
Well, yeah, I
These
mean,
are city
I
requests.
understand it. You got to do more than bare minimum code requirements.
Okay,
Right.
thumbs up, take it out?
Take it out.
Yeah, I would take it. My exact words were, what are we
I
asking?
got 3 taking it
So
out.
that's,
Very flexible.
okay.
I got 3 to take it out.
I'd defer to staff on this.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I would defer to staff on this. You got to do something with it because it's
We'll try to reword it.
okay. Fine. B. Open space. Provide open space including a main park at west end of Lake Point that offers views of the lake and that is sufficient in size, approximately 3 acres, to develop a variety of recreational opportunities, passive and active, for the residents of the project area and the public. Yes, no, yes? Councilmember
I have a
Smith?
comment. Because we've increased the acreage in the prior section, and I'm wondering if we actually need to put an approximate size here. It says approximately 3 acres, but we've already increased what we want, so maybe that'll allow for greater flexibility in whatever that component is. Just a thought.
Take out approximately 3 acres?
Yes.
Well, now you could do a postage type thing if we didn't at least stick with a minimum, unlike certainly sticking with a minimum.
But if we've increased the whole to 15
But then,
acres.
but that's a minimum that he can then
Okay.
adjust appropriately.
I can live with it. It was just a thought. So I'm okay. I'm not going to have heartburn on that.
I mean, if we're asking for 18 acres, an increase to 15 to 18 acres, then I think it behooves him to put it in a place that's most usable and rather than us trying to parcel it out for him. I mean, I'd rather just keep this higher level and let him decide. And, if that comes to that, we can always say, well, we don't like it, we want something different, so. Anyway. View corridors.
So what do we decide
I don't
on
know
this?
where view corridors came from because we've never had view corridors. And Mr. Anderson always used to say you're in trouble with view corridor. Councilmember Danuski.
So I guess, not to sound like a broken record, but I don't know what that means. I don't know view corridors from where to here to
Yeah.
what, and I don't know, I guess this isn't very important to me to include at this
Councilmember
point.
Schreiber.
This was
'cause
my,
This is yours.
this was mine. So the intent of this was to retain view corridors to the lake from the north side, which is the only area that currently has a view corridor onto that property, through that property onto the lake.
So from
that's
68th Street?
Well, no, from the north side of Lake Point, which would be Bothell Way and up from there. So that's north of Lake Point.
We've got the whole view of corridor along the 522
Exactly.
corridor
Right.
that we did, and you're wanting to increase that view corridor then further up 68, further up 522?
Again, we don't want to, the intent is not to lose view corridor to the lake from the surrounding area. So that is an analysis that somebody will need to do. But that's the intent. So there's lots of areas that have views that we don't want to lose.
Councilor Smith.
So I had, and if you look at the matrix, that was also one of the things that I had also mentioned, as well as Councilmember Shrebnick, and I think it's more or less the same intent, that I think it's easy when you control the site to be solely focused on just what you want to do to maximize your economic success. And so I think the views are relevant, whether they're view corridors from parks that will be developed in open space, or whether they're views that are impacting other properties. I just think that's I don't exactly know how it goes in the parameter agreement, honestly, because we don't have a project of enough definition to analyze it, so maybe it's not appropriate, but I agree with the concern.
We can't see the lake now from 68th and 522, or even halfway down the block we can't see because there's buildings, there's cement plants, there's everything else. So, Deputy Mayor.
Well, yes, I'm looking at Street View on Google Maps here from 522, and I drive this every day, and so I just wanted to double check that I wasn't imagining things. There really is no view of the lake through Lake Point.
Right.
The view of the lake is further north where the cement plants are.
Exactly what I said. It's north.
Further north.
Of 522, uphill. The intent
Oh,
is not to lose view corridor. So however you want to articulate that, I trust that you get the gist.
I just don't think
further west.
I just don't think Lake Point is blocking the view of the lake from almost anywhere. It's blocking the view of the hill behind it where the golf course is, maybe the Sammamish River at some points, but the lake is kind of a different matter. I don't know.
Why don't we state the intent, what you're saying, that we don't lose the existing view corridors?
Yeah.
To the lake.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll just put it the way that you state.
And we've studied that before in
Right.
certain business zones along there.
Right.
Exactly.
We do have some data.
Further to the west, yeah. All right. D, boathouse and docks provide location sufficient size and accommodation for a shell house and related facilities for public rowing and paddling programs. I think this was something he also wanted, but it certainly provides more access to the water there off the point. So we're in agreement leaving D in. Passenger ferry on E.
Hang on, I am confused. Was one of these added because it does show up both almost verbatim in 3 and 5? What is the difference between? Obviously I would like that, but I don't know whether it belongs in 3 or 5, but probably not both exactly the same.
The boathouse, L on in 3.
Oh,
So the reason-
D has docks.
Yeah.
But,
In D.
oh, no, actually,
And
they
a
both have
boathouse.
docks. Yeah, I don't know what the difference is, so.
Well, the main difference is even though you're seeing it in Section 3, this is over and above what the developer had originally said he would do, and he kind of has put this into his project based on knowing that this is an important one to include into it. And so this isn't a P suffix, it's not a code requirement, so it's above and beyond. So we thought it was appropriate to put it in both places. So if the project changes to not include it, it's still something in the back that if we need to add to it to make up the public benefits we have.
Yeah, Councilmember Danuski.
So the wording means different things to me on both of them. L on Section 3 tells me that they're building a boathouse. And D in section 5 says location of sufficient size to accommodate, and I like the wording in D better than the other,
Yeah.
so they should be consistent.
Yeah, D is certainly worded better.
Which wording do you like better?
D.
D?
In 5?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
We'll just make both sections the same? Okay.
That would be good.
Or why don't we make sure that one is a minimum requirement and one is a public benefit addition? We'll just make sure that it's worded correctly. Because I would agree with Councilmember Dusky. It's hard to figure out what the difference is, so we'll work on that.
Well, now I'm confused.
Councilmember Smith.
Actually removing the requirement to construct a boathouse, just so you know.
Well, we certainly don't want to remove that requirement.
Tells it for 3L, it says boathouse for hand-powered boathouse itself.
Yep.
So it's asking the developer, he apparently has already agreed, whereas D is referring more to the site.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sufficient size.
Bring the L over to this D.
Or combine the concepts and put them in both places. Because it's got to be sufficient size. and
Yeah, but yeah,
you may-
that's the key with, on 5 is sufficient size. And
Yeah.
Well, but
I don't want to lose that. Yes, Councilor Shrubnik?
Yeah, but I mean, it's a point well taken. That 5D doesn't talk about actually building it. So, yeah, somehow we do need both of those concepts.
I like that idea. So we'll combine Section 3 and Section 5, and then we'll just make sure that the language is the same in both.
Yeah, or just put start D with build.
We can turn it over to staff at this point.
Staff can figure that
We'll
out.
figure it out.
All right, so we're in agreement with that. Okay, passenger ferry. This is the most logical place for it to go. This is what we've always thought it was going to go, and I think we should keep it in there. Passenger ferry in the terminal. Okay. Parking garage, to partner with and coordinate with Sound Transit on ST3 Bus Rapid Transit Project to provide a location of sufficient size in Phase 1 of the project or sooner to accommodate a parking structure and transit station stop that will meet the transit demands of ST3 project. And Ben, we're running out of time on this one.
We are, Mr. Mayor, and I think that developers very much interested in working with ST3
I know
to
he
get
is,
this
but
in.
he's got to make a decision here pretty darn quick.
I think that we probably have to make a decision, Mr. Mayor, in terms of, is this the location we want?
I think we've made that clear as a council for a number.
Okay, I was obviously wasn't here, I was on vacation for a while, so if the
Okay.
council made a decision, we can accelerate this thing as fast as we do.
Deputy Mayor.
Oh, I was just going to, you said what I was going to say. We're in a tight time crunch here, and I think saying Phase 1 or sooner, like the mayor read, might make sense because ST3 Sound Transit may need to get in there sooner than Phase 1 and start their work.
They're going to make their decision by the end of this year.
We get on it, and we've been working on it. The only reason I asked that question, the Sound Transit staff raised some questions for us in terms of vehicles that are getting in and out of this location at our busiest intersection. And that's why I asked the questions. Have we made a decision?
Right,
This is where we want it, or do we want it somewhere else within our city?
But there's always been, at least the presentation I've seen, the garage could either be down at 65th, which is there by the office, or closer to 68th. And I don't know that it should be closer to 68th, again, because of traffic flow in that.
Right.
But looking back over previous plans and the history of that development, there's always been a traffic light planned for 65th.
We'll get on it.
But I don't want to go that far. Councilmember Curtis.
So kind of another way to ask the question, the way I've been thinking about it, if Widener is going to develop it, and it's going to happen in the relatively near term, I think this would really help their parking, their traffic mitigation.
Of course.
If Widener doesn't do it, and if this is a long-term project that happens eventually, in the next few decades, then I'm not sure it's the best place for it to happen. So that's kind of one of my questions. Is it the best place to happen, no matter if nothing develops here at this point in time? And I think it adds to the traffic at our worst corner in town.
We'll continue to work with them. We accelerate those frequency of those meetings with Sound Transit. And
Yeah. I mean, there's basically two choices here.
Right.
Lake Point or 73rd.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it.
Sounds like you made a decision. We'll make it happen as best as we can.
All right. Affordable housing. Work with housing agencies like Arch to obtain subsidies to help bring affordable housing units to 30% average King County median income, and collaborate with an affordable housing developer. Sound Transit to provide affordable housing on site in conjunction with a parking garage for Sound Transit and ST3 Bus Rapid Transit Project and other agencies. I mean, one of the thoughts here was because there is a parking garage there and because it's transit, it makes it easy for people to get to work, and we have a serious need in this community for senior housing for one and workforce housing for people making $15 an hour. Councilmember Smith and then Councilmember Curtis.
I wouldn't mind adding 30 to 50%. And the reason is, well, there's still a significant need at 50%. But as we learned with Kenmore Village, once you start calculating the cost of the units, it's a significant amount.
That's why Arch.
What's that?
That's why Arch.
Right. But I would just say that I think it would be nice to maybe have it as a range, like 30 to 50 or something like that.
Yeah, certainly. I'm happy with 30 to 50. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, and I think, if we're just building a garage, that's kind of a lost opportunity. It's only going to be a few stories, it's only going to be a couple of stories, and that's a lot of wasted infrastructure. So I think our ability to try to get partners together to put housing on top of that makes a lot of sense. So I support this.
Councilmember Curtis, sorry.
I guess my concern was because I'm not sure there's going to be a good time match between Whitener's development plan and ST3. I was thinking that we should delete the part after Sound Transit. So let's see, King County median income and coordinate with an affordable housing developer such as Sound Transit and or other agencies. Because for us to say we want conjunction with parking garage and ST3 and bus rapid, I think this is out of our control, and I don't think we should put it in here.
That's huge. Sound Transit policy now is to locate affordable housing around their terminals and garages, and they have.
If it doesn't happen, then it's irrelevant. So I'm just thinking we should say we want it, so such as Sound Transit or other agencies, but leave out the specifics because I think the timing may be out of our control to control any of these specifics. I would just, such as, it'd be right before Sound Transit, and take out to provide affordable housing on site in conjunction with parking garage for the Sound Transit ST3 Bus Rapid Transit Project, and then finish the sentence with and or other agencies. So Sound Transit or other agencies, we want to work with them, we want affordable housing, but to link it to a project that's moving fast, I'm not sure the linkage is going to be there.
Thank you.
And we're all agreeing that the range is 30 to 50%? Great.
Yeah, 30, but there's got to be a significant amount of 30%.
We'll try our best, but you have been through one experience on this one with one project, and you saw the numbers. It was very difficult and challenging.
But that's why Arch.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the South Kirkland Park and Ride and how successful that's been. That's got a large part of 30 to 50%, and it's got market rate, and you cannot tell them apart. It just blends in, and it's a fabulous use of the site.
Very familiar. Great example. Thank you.
All right. Interactive public art. Provide locations for and design and install public art, taking into consideration opportunities for interactive art. Yes.
So I absolutely agree with the concept of providing locations for, but I do have a problem with and design and install public art. I don't want to leave our public art to be decided by Widener.
Councilmember Curtis?
So I guess I have a different question. I know that public art is required for public projects, but I'm not sure we should require public art for private projects.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I would recommend adding a little sentence at the end, not required for private development. So the public piece that they're giving to improve the public access for different areas where the public is, that maybe we can require art. But for private stuff where he's putting commercial and housing, I don't think we can require something that the public has put on themselves, an extra cost to a project. And 1% of $1.5 billion is a lot of money for art.
I think that was
I'm
the
looking
intent.
at the city attorney.
I think the issue is with the language. My interpretation of public art was art to be used by the public, not public art that's determined and financed by the city. Isn't that the intent
Right,
here?
yeah. We can work on that wording to be, the public art that's put in the public spaces.
I guess is the city council agreeable to fund public art, fund art that is approved by the city? Is that essentially what this was intended to do?
Art in public spaces.
In public spaces, okay.
But it was intended.
Fund and provide art in public spaces. Is that?
That's more
That
the
was the
intent.
intent.
Fund and provide public art in public spaces.
With input from the city on what art will be there?
Is
I
the
have
city
the same
deciding
concern.
or is Widener deciding?
Yeah, is
The
Widener
city's
deciding what art
deciding.
will be there?
Well, those are details we could
Public.
certainly, these are just topics
Yeah.
that the city council might consider to be a public benefit. So we can be pretty general.
Okay.
Okay. We in agreement? Okay. Public events and activities. Partner with the city to sponsor activities, events, and entertainment at the main park, at amphitheater, and other locations. Examples are parade, fireworks viewing, farmers market, and live music, etc. Agreement? All right. Indoor aquatic recreation facility. Contribute financially or in kind to the development, construction, and operation of a public indoor aquatic recreation facility on the property or the additional property. I'm not clear what the additional property is.
You're not clear on the additional property?
Yeah.
The 45 acres is the original property, and the 5 acres that the developer has since purchased is the additional property.
Councilmember Danuski.
So I personally would want to remove this one because we as a council have not decided to do an aquatic recreation facility, and to get Widener to pay for something that we haven't even decided as a project as a city is kind of cart before the horse.
And also aquatic means digging in the property, and I think there's a consent decree that says you can't dig. So, Councilmember Curtis.
I guess I think that an aquatic recreation center should be a multi-city function from those using it, and the cost shouldn't be dumped on one private enterprise. I think it should be removed.
Councilmember Marshall?
So as a compromise, I think I would propose that we could remove the requirement on the property or the additional property. We could just strike those words so that there'd be an opportunity for contribution to a general fund eventually at some point that would be multi-jurisdictional and could be a lot of different contributors, private and public. And the nexus, the connection to a public pool, I think is fundamental. We have the KWAC that we support. We have the access to the water that we are emphatically supporting, walkways and waterways that we are emphatically supporting, a passenger ferry that we are emphatically supporting. We have walkways along this dedicated property that we're asking for. All these things depend upon people knowing how to swim. There is only one swimming pool left now in Kenmore, and that is private in the Uplake neighborhood. And I think that at least leaving this little option in could be an opportunity for the developer to contribute to something that came along, so that we can, have an opportunity for all our kids to learn how to swim if we're going to be emphasizing all these activities in the way that we've had and the way we supported through Bothell Pool for the last 30 years, 40 years, in which thousands of us learned how to swim at public expense.
Deputy Mayor.
I agree with Councilmember Marshall that a indoor public pool is something that we need to be looking at down the line. In this particular case, especially if we take out the on the property or the additional property, we've taken it from being just a requirement on the property, like a lot of these things are, to a pound of flesh saying, pay us money so we can do this other thing that's not directly related to what's happening on the property. And especially when we're trying to close that financial gap, this is a direct addition to the financial gap. So as much as I appreciate the spirit of the proposal, and as much as I support trying to figure out the issue of tackling a public pool, which is something we do need to figure out, I can't support this particular addition.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, one thing that you might want to also consider when you ask these things, be careful what you wish for. If you get it, do you have resources to maintain it?
Yeah.
Aquatic facilities are one of the most expensive ones to maintain it, and the most cities are getting out of it. The King County, for a while, got rid of them. Sammamish actually turned it over to YMCA, and I know North Bend, Snoqualmie, did the similar thing. So this is a very expensive recreational opportunity. So my suggestion is we may want to do a little bit some homework on this to see if we can, in fact, financially afford to maintain such facility, even if it's built.
Thank
So in here, I have to support Councilmember Marshall on this. It does say construction and operation. So we would obviously that would have to be negotiated because of exactly what you said. And I do agree completely with Councilmember Marshall's statement that we are supporting a lot of water-oriented activities. We've got lots of folks here who their kids are going to have difficulty getting transit out of the area to pools. We'll have trouble affording to learn how to swim. I mean, if we want to actually do this, this is a perfect opportunity to put it on the wish list, which is what this is. I mean, he can bite or not, and we can choose to accept that or not. So, I mean, this is literally a wish list. And it's also, it would be a huge amenity to the people actually living there. So, I mean, I actually think that, he might be interested in this. So anyway, I don't see any harm in keeping it on a wish list.
Councilmember Curtis.
Yeah, my big concern is we already have a big deficit, and all this is going to do is add tens of millions of dollars worth of deficit that somehow we need to come up with the money. And I just would rather be coming up with money for other things that we've talked about before instead of this new thing that just came up at the last discussion. So I'm still in favor of deleting it, and I'm going to make a motion that we delete Section J from 5.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All right, discussion on this. Councilmember Marshall.
Yes. So to address Councilmember Herbig's point about connection, so traffic, of course, the impacts of this project affect off-project, off-site issues like traffic. Traffic doesn't happen on site. The importance of the citizens in our community learning how to swim isn't tied to the site specifically. So that's why I say a modest proposal simply to strike the last words that I mentioned would work in terms of just having it either on-site or a modest contribution thereof, and then the staff's mention of the expense, I think, is indeed it's well considered, and I regard it as one of the fundamental disgraces of our community, the North Shore community, Bothell, Kenmore, all the rest, to let the Bothell pool go down the drain and to allow our kids to not have or to take away from our kids that opportunity to learn how to swim. With all the wealth and all the money we've made in this past boom, I consider it a disgrace. And I hope that we're able to move out of it. I just bring up the opportunity here for a modest contribution, perhaps at most, from a developer from a site that seems to be very much aquatics-based in a city that is emphasizing aquatic recreation activities over and over again.
Deputy Mayor?
And again, I completely agree that we need to figure out the issue of a public pool and build one. But I can't remember what the study said to fix up the pool up at St. Edwards, but I remember it being tens of millions of dollars. So even a small contribution towards that, I mean, when you're talking about at the low end of a financial gap of $60 million or so, you're talking about adding, 10, 20% on top of that. And then even if they give us a donation, okay, then we park it in a fund. Then we got to find the rest of the money to put it together and figure out the M&O. I think my sticking point is just that we're sticking something that is an important community asset, and we're sticking it to one guy and saying, give us your money. And I just can't quite get there on this. So I appreciate the spirit of this. I want to continue working on the issue and talking to Bothell and the school district and figuring out a way forward on this, but I just can't. This isn't a tactic that I'm comfortable with.
Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I pretty much don't doubt anything you said, and I think you said it nicely. I think what's unfortunate in this situation is we even discussed this at our retreat, and we've had very lukewarm reaction, not even knowing where it would go as a council discussion. And then my fear is that, because basically every pool facility that gets built now is pretty much north of $30 million. And so it's like, it's so far out of the realm of what we've even talked about. And then, as Ben said, then we have the operation side, and I really do see this as a regional issue, much more than for a city of 23,000 to try to address. So while I appreciate the spirit of what you said, I just can't support taking our eye off all the other issues we've got in this agreement to work on and put staff time and energy towards going down something that I don't think has real viability.
All right. Councilmember Curtis.
I think there's a difference in aquatic activities that are required to be on a lake and an aquatic center that could literally be built anywhere. Dig a big hole and put enough money into it, and you can swim in Bothell or anywhere else. So I don't think being on Lake Point has a great advantage, and I think with the issues of environmental concern, it may actually be more challenging, more expensive.
But we see the option of not having it limited on site with a contribution.
All right, so we have a motion on the table to pull J, indoor aquatic recreation facility, contribute financially or in kind to the development, construction, and operation of public indoor aquatic recreational facility on the property and or additional property. So, sticking with what we do, clerk, please take the roll.
Mayor Baker?
No.
Councilmember Shrek?
Wait. What? Yes.
Remove the section.
Yes. Confusing myself.
Councilmember Shrevenick?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall?
No.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
Passed.
5-2.
5-2.
5-2, okay. Next one, monitoring of industrial emissions prior to and after completion of the project. Install air quality monitoring devices to monitor the emissions from a neighboring industrial operation. Continually evaluate the potential effects of such industrial emissions on the project, inhabitants, workers, and visitors. Councilmember Danuski.
I have some concerns on this one. I know we've had studies that have said that if you're going to monitor the emissions coming out of a plant, it needs to be at the plant. So if we put that somewhere on the Lake Point site, you won't necessarily know what you're getting. And you won't know where it's coming from. You won't know if it's coming from 522. You won't know if it's coming from cement plant. So I have that problem. And then I also don't think Widener is the right person to evaluate the effects and evaluate it and anyway do this work. This is, Puget Sound clean air type function. And I don't think it's reasonable for a developer to do that.
Yeah, I think we've looked at putting stuff on 522 before that, and Puget Sound Clean Air says no, it's not valid. And also, I think the wind is blowing in the wrong direction to really have any substantial effect on that property. City Manager.
Yeah, so we heard PSCAA, Craig Kenworthy, come and talk to us about if you're not monitoring on site, you can't really say where the source is coming from. However, I do have an idea that might get at Councilmember Marshall's intent, and that is what we also found out is that we can't require Cadman or Cal Portland to do testing, above and beyond what they're required by the state. What you could say maybe is if Cal Portland and CEMEX become part of Lake Point, that they start monitoring air quality on site once they own it.
That makes sense. Yeah.
All right. So can we make that change?
Are you okay with Councilmember Marshall?
I stick by my original. I stick by my original request, but.
Okay, so then we have enough on the council, right, that want to make that change as suggested by the city manager? I'm seeing a lot of heads nod. Okay, great. So that one is a change. All right.
I have an addition for 5.
Yep.
So I'd like to add, I think at this point we're at L if I'm doing my ABCs correctly. I don't have exact wording, so this is something that staff may need to work out. But I would like to add in language requiring soil sampling in areas where they are going to be getting into the dirt.
I think it's also required by the college's consent decree, but we emphasize it by putting it here.
Yeah, I'd like to make it clear in here that we will know what is in the soil that people are going to be contacting, and what's in the soil, any soil is going to be excavated out.
Sure.
Councilmember Curtis and Shrevenick.
So I did ask earlier that dissent decree be added somewhere, wherever staff thinks it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Because it's such a fundamental thing, I think we didn't think of putting it in here.
Right. Councilmember Shrevenick.
Well, and similarly, I don't think we want it on the wish list if it's a foregone conclusion. So we would not want it in 5. It would need to be with that other section.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was an agreement reached between the property owner and the Department of Ecology, and then there was a consent decree issued. Councilmember Shrevenick. Well, we emphasize it here as the deputy mayor is asking for. So.
Yeah, I guess I'm just asking that soil sampling be called out wherever staff thinks it's appropriate explicitly in this somewhere.
All right. We done with 5? 6. Widener's commitment.
This is also where we're talking to look into reduced density options and the internal rate of returns that Councilmember Smith was mentioning in earlier part of his discussions.
All right, city considerations. Or Councilmember Shrubnik.
Sorry. On 6, I just want to add one word, and that word is height. Either before or after density or scale, somewhere in that little list on 6. Because I don't think height is the same thing as scale or density.
Financial question.
Yeah. It's to analyze a project that looks at those variables.
Yeah, to reduce the financial gap. So if height fits in there, then great.
And where would you put it, Councilmember? Where we suggested we put that?
Right after scale, either in with reduced in density, scale and or height.
Got it. Thank you.
We in agreement with that? 7. City considerations. Are we happy with 7?
Look that way.
Oh, look this way. Okay. Look this way. Councilmember Smith.
What's the question? I'm sorry, I missed it.
I'd like to allow the most flexibility where those credits can take place.
Is your mic
Well,
on, Councilmember
if we,
Smith? Is your mic on?
No, it is not, so thank you.
If we come across something, a project that we aren't thinking of now and would want it to be able to get this credit, we can change our facility plan at any time.
Okay.
So we can, if somebody came up with a new idea that you wanted to put on the plan, we can update the plan.
Okay, I just wanted to be more inclusive than exclusive, and so
Okay.
that's great.
Okay, I was handed the gavel as he was leaving, so I thank Councilmember Curtis.
Speaker. Number 7, the basic sentence there. If Widener provides public benefits, as discussed in section, I think it's 5, of this agreement, the city will consider the following. The word consider seems really weak. So things in our control, we will probably do, but a lot of it is out of our control, and we could take 1 minute to look at it and say, nah, we considered it, done. And I guess I'd like words a little stronger, but not such a commitment that we must do it. So I was thinking of words something like, the city will support the project using some or all of the following options. So there's a bunch of options we've looked here, and we will look at some, we'll look at all of them, but we were not going to commit ourselves to do all of them. That would just plumb be a lot of work. But yet just to consider just seems like we're going to have to work hard to find the money for this gap. And so I guess maybe it's a legal question. So my suggestion was support the project using some or all of the options. So I'm not committing us to anything, but just a little stronger than consider.
Okay. Mr. City Attorney?
I do have a concern with supporting the project. To say you support the project at this point in time, when everything, is tentative, preliminary, I would recommend you not say support the project in there. Now, I guess what we're looking for is whether there's a stronger phrase or wording than consider.
Could you use the word evaluate instead of consider?
I don't know if it helps to get to Councilmember Curtis's point. From a legal standpoint, I just want you to say that this is something you will take into account, consider whatever word you come up with, but I would not want you to make more commitment than that. You can say
I guess
consider
I don't want to
carefully,
commit
which
to look
is
at all
almost
of them. Maybe something like leave it consider, but all or some. I don't know. Maybe just leave it alone.
I'm personally happy with the way it is.
Okay, leave it alone?
I'm okay.
That's
I'm
I'd like
okay.
to know what if everybody else thinks it needs to be.
Too touchy.
I expressed my concern. That's all I need to do.
Well, I think the intent of the entire parameter agreement is to send a signal on what we're open to considering. And I think the developer knows that we're not yet committing to any of these things, but the fact that we're laying out things that we're willing to consider says a lot.
I'm okay.
I agree with that comment. By making a list here, you are saying quite a bit. Because right now, you said nothing, and there's nothing in writing.
Okay.
So are we in agreement here? We're in agreement with agreement? Okay. Great.
I have a question on F, on 7F. It's just a question. It says establishing a community facility district, and I read about it and tried to understand it. I think it's pretty clear that it takes 100% of the property owners, so it's going to be Widener. But what I wanted to know is if the city itself incurs any additional financial liability at all or cedes control of the project at all in the creation of that.
The answer is no. The city doesn't have any financial commitment to it, or it doesn't have any impact to the bonding capacity either. The money that's put into it is put into it by the developer. It's run through a 5-person board, which is 3 council members and 2 of the developer side. What else am I missing on it?
I think that's a short answer is no. It's this particular statute was, as we understand, created for the Black Diamond, this donut hole development issue. But nobody used it except Microsoft and Redmond. The Microsoft partnered with Redmond to create that additional transit connections with the Sound Transit station there. And as Brian said, it's the 5 board members, 3 council members representing those 5, and the 2 appointed by the developer. They're accountable to the state auditors. They do go through a separate auditing process, different than our books, and they have a totally different process, council members, that there's clear separation between us and them.
Great.
We had an extensive presentation because we weren't quite sure about that also. We asked the Microsoft folks and the Redmond folks to give us a presentation on that one. So we did the research on this one.
Great.
There could be a situation where 2 or 3 of these could go together. So you could get the community facility district that's being funded by, the construction sales taxes or, whatever brownfield grants are being generated or any other funds like that. So there's a lot of this that can overlap as it goes forward.
Yep.
You got everything you need on this.
We sure do.
More than what we need. We got it.
Everybody's.
Wait, we're not to the end of the agreement.
Does anybody have any other comments or questions
Yeah.
on the rest of the agreement?
I do. Mine's number 11. Is yours before 11?
Yeah, we're at public participation on 8.
Oh, okay. We're still going through. Okay. I misunderstood.
We could probably do better wording on this one. I think the intent with this, Councilmember Smith, was to have a public involvement plan that is not a one-stop, one-shot deal, but it continues throughout the different phases of the project. So let us do a little better wording on that one. I think that's what the intent, that's what we're trying to do here.
Can I ask a follow-up really quick?
Yeah, please, Deputy
So
Mayor.
you're talking about something that starts by the end of this year, public process starts by the end of this year and continues all the way through phase 2, 3, whatever?
Yeah.
Okay.
EIS process and the development agreement process and the first stage of the project, so it's just ongoing process.
Okay, so we're happy with 8. 9, anything on 9?
Where are you guys at? Number 9?
We're on 9, and we're looking for.
This is really just an extension of an agreement that we already have in place.
Okay. Nobody's got questions or concerns with it? Okay, 10. Traffic analysis. So this, I'm taking as something that is going to be started here fairly soon, because it says prior to conducting any further design of the project, we must do a traffic analysis. So that's going to have to be done here.
Well, I
before any
think
more
that the
design goes on.
developer was eager to do it. That their challenge is that they don't know what density do they do the traffic modeling or analysis for. So I think with the direction that we're getting from council, they should be able to provide us some traffic numbers.
Is everybody okay with that? Okay, 11. Project studies and documents.
We have 2 over here.
Oh, sorry. See, I looked there first and I saw nothing and I went this way. All right, Councilmember Smith and Curtis.
Well, so I got a lot of issues on 11, but
well, we were there on 10, but so okay, so we'll go to 11.
oh, I thought it.
No, we're
we
done
finished
with 10.
10,
We're
okay,
on
we
11.
finished
We're on 11.
So
11.
I don't think it's inclusive enough. So on the way it's worded, I would rather it say that since we're trying to work with them to close a financial gap, I think it needs to be worded in such a way that all the documentation that's been prepared and the permits and studies and everything, not just those analyzed in the HRA study, needs to be provided. And I've got verbiage for it. And then also at the before the second to the last sentence, it just talks about a geotech report and other information used to calculate piling cost. I would also add on that and other costs associated with extraordinary site development, because there could be things to do with capping and more toxins or things that we don't know that are going to be extraordinary costs. And I think if they're going to ask, if that's part of the financial issue, we need to have access to everything. So
No, that's
I
a
do
good
have
point.
verbiage, but I just think there's a lot of ways that could be rewritten better.
That's good. Extraordinary costs, absolutely.
So what I got is at the end of that one sentence, add and other costs associated with the extraordinary costs.
Extraordinary site
Piling
development.
costs and.
Site development costs? Okay.
And then at the so I'll just tell you what I put at, and I can provide it to the clerk, but I rewrote the first part of it, and I said Widener agrees to provide the city with all studies, plans, documents, and information prepared to develop the proposed project. This includes all studies, plans, documents, and information analyzed in the HRA study, and also subsequent information used to develop the proposed project. And so my point was that It shouldn't be limited to just what was in the HRA.
Okay.
Councilmember Curtis?
So I had two thoughts on this. One was the title. So it says Widener's going to share information with us, and the city will share information with Widener. So just to change the title a little bit to project studies and document sharing. It says we want this project to be successful. We want everybody to have all the information they could possibly need to answer all the questions anybody has. And I guess my thought on Councilmember Smith's idea is to change it just a little bit and say Widener agrees to provide the city with all studies, plans, documents, and information prepared to develop the proposed project, period. Doesn't say where it comes from, who analyzed what. It just says we want everything and we'll share our stuff. So the last sentence says we'll give Widener studies, plans, documents, information prepared in support of this proposal. So we're all going to share everything and we're going to do it both ways. So it seems like that would be a fairly simple way to address.
I'm fine with that as long as, I mean, the essence of what you're saying is the same. I just want to make sure everything's available. Because what I don't want is for them to say, you know, tell us they've got a gap that it's a problem that they want us to help solve, and we don't have the full slew of documentation to support it or to analyze it.
Okay, let me see if I got this. 3 changes to this section. 1 is add sharing at the end of the title. 2 is to put a period after the proposed project and delete analyzed in the HRNA studies and all subsequent information used to develop the proposed project. And 3 is to add some language at the end of the second to the last sentence. It says, and the other costs associated with extraordinary site development costs.
That's good.
Okay?
That works.
All right.
So we're there on 11 then. Everybody's happy with those changes. Okay, 12, timeline for development.
Of course, we put these numbers, these dates in here, so of course we need to talk to the developer and see what actually, you know, if this will work for them too, so.
So looking to break ground by the third quarter, or by the third quarter of 2022.
They are, in our first development, or not, or parameter agreement, they did put some dates in there, and we kind of pushed them out a couple of years, based on everything else that's kind of happened.
However, consistent with the numbers that we have been discussing with them.
So break ground in third quarter of 2022 with the first phase completed by 2024.
I think unless council members have a question on it, we should just move on.
Okay, fine. Any questions then on the work group? I got to look both ways a couple of times. All right. Hold it. Project impact on neighboring properties and businesses. Councilmember Marshall.
Yes, if we could add in, somewhere in there where the staff feels appropriate, the mitigation or impacts on lake traffic and boating and aerospace traffic.
And I guess I would like to see something in there that sort of, I don't want to use the word protects necessarily, but make sure that Kenmore Air has got operating space. And, you know, sort of.
This is where you guys, this is where you guys start to get tired and not too direct on what you want to see in here.
Okay, I want to see some language in there that protects operating area for Kenmore Air. Is that direct enough? Okay.
But I'm trying to catch the Councilmember Marshall. I don't know if I captured what you just said, sir.
Yes.
That one more time.
That was from the in the matrix, mainly the language from the matrix, which is about midway through the page. So it'd be somewhere in there to study the impacts and mitigations on, where am I? Lake traffic, including boating and aerospace traffic.
And you see, then my concern would be the boating side of that and the ability for Kenmore Air to operate safely in their normal areas.
I think so.
All right. Councilmember Danuski.
I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but I guess I'm curious why this comment from Councilmember Marshall was not in the parameter agreement and was decided it's better in SEPA. So I don't know if we're changing that or what.
It's a standard thing to look at through the SEPA process.
I guess more looking into why you didn't put it in a parameter agreement to begin with. Why
It
you decided
seemed,
not to.
just generally, it seemed more appropriate to go, in my opinion, in the later process.
See, if we're adding boats into that study, then my thought is the last sentence there talks about being sensitive and not interfere with Kenmore Air seaplane flight path operations, and I want to get it down after they've landed into the water path. Councilmember Shrubnik.
Similarly, I know that Mr. Banks called out dock access, and that is also different from the flight path. So I think if we're calling out specific elements of his operation, we'd want to just do that consistently and call out the relevant aspects. Or we could just leave it at operations, period. But it's kind of funny to isolate the flight, boy, say that 3 times fast, flight path.
Yeah.
Part of his operations. That seems kind of specific.
About flight path and other operations?
Flight path and, I'm sorry?
Other operations.
Okay.
As long as he got a way to get his planes from the air to the dock without running into numerous watercraft.
I guess I would just add, so the boating, maybe we could add the word boating safety, because I think that's part of your intent, boating safety.
Okay.
Okay, so relationship extension to extension agreement. Any questions? Effective date and term. Any questions?
You got one.
Yep, got one. Councilman Curtis.
I was confused on this one. To me, it seems like there's 3 choices and 2 ors. So one might be, it'll terminate December 31, 2020. Or when a development agreement happens, or the date of commencement of construction. But I don't see how you can get construction of phase 1 without a development agreement. So it seems like the 2 ors should be the date or the effective date of a development agreement, not construction. Do you understand my confusion? It seems like one is, to get to construction, you have to have had a development agreement. So why would you list them both as ors?
There are also, what is not written here, Councilmember Curtis, is the commercial site development extension agreement that was extended till the end of 2020, I want to say, including the 19th and 20 to 2 years. So we're trying to stay under the umbrella of that deadline and then trying to be consistent with that deadline and the deadlines that we're putting it here. So let me see if we can figure out a better way to write this thing. and
Did I
be
hear?
consistent.
Did I hear Rod say "mm-hmm"? Did you understand what?
We'll work on it.
Okay.
I said because
That's
there
my
is a
brains over there.
consideration for why Ben wrote it this way, so we'll have to talk about it.
Right. Let us just work on this one to
Good
clarify.
lawyer answer.
Yeah.
All right. Notices. So if Widener is noticing the city, it comes to Brian, and if we're noticing Widener, it goes to attention of, but that'll get figured out in Widener's contacts. So, Councilmember Curtis.
I guess in general, I prefer to list a title, Development of Services Director, because people do change. This thing is going on so long, so rather than identify a person, I'd rather identify a position. But I don't feel strongly about that. If you want to leave both.
Okay. Can that be done? Because the requirements, if you scroll back a little bit, please.
Yeah,
we're looking for certified mail and return receipt and everything else. And does that work for a title rather than a person?
We didn't tell them the bad news yet.
So, anyway, any other issues with 17 on noticing? We'll let the city determine who's it's best to notice. Severability, the entire agreement amendment, successors and assigns, and no third-party rights, no joint ventures, jurisdiction and venue, enforcement, no waiver of prevailing party costs, no enforcement, no waiver of prevailing party costs. And counterparts. So, are we done? We're seeing thumbs up everywhere, so I guess we're done if you have direction. Yes, sir, Mr. Yaziki.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you. This is very great input. We'll work through it, but I would like you to give a little bit of flexibility to your city manager. This is a negotiation process. There's going to be a lot of back and forth on this one, so hope that you would give that privilege and then at the end, you will see the final document anyway. So there's going to be lots of give and take on this one.
Yeah, I think we all kind of expect that.
Thank you, sir.
And we know that he's gotten to be quite good at this negotiation stuff. All right. Are we done with this? We're done with this. All right, so do we want to take 5 minutes, or do we want to jump right into this? And the next question is, how long do we want to jump into this, since it's now 10 minutes to 10, and I've heard people say we're not working past 10, so. 5? Or we just want to jump?
You want late enough to have.
Fine. So you want to? Then we're going to jump right into it for 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, if we even want to start a budget conversation at 10 p.m.
So maybe we don't want to start. We have a lot of people been sitting here waiting.
Yeah, we could, if we could.
And I feel guilty about that.
We can get through 8 appointments.
I know Joanne lives for this stuff.
I think we can do a quick one.
We can what?
I think we get through 1 or 2 of these.
Your Honor.
So then I'm hearing people want to get through at least city clerk.
Another one. I recommend that we at least get through city attorney. Because of his hourly rate, I want to get him done, and so he doesn't have to come back for another night.
Well, then let's just start with him.
Right now, without a break?
I mean, yeah, it's going on 10. Do we need a break for a couple minutes?
City attorney, probably 5 minutes.
Okay, let's go with city attorney, please.
Okay, right now?
Yep, right now.
Okay.
You got good people running that bar, don't you? Yes, go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm very excited to get started here. I did want to ask, since we do have a short period of time tonight, if we could start with the city attorney, and as mentioned, and go to public safety.
That's good, because the chief needs a break too.
Yes, exactly. So I'll just skip right to the city attorney's budget. And this is actually a very short conversation on the city attorney legal budget tonight. As you know, these are the services provided by the city attorney: land use advice and contracts, and attending council meetings, and providing direction, drafting ordinances and resolutions. And we created a preliminary budget over the 2-year period of $530,000. This is about 2.5% increase per year, and it is increased over the last budget, and it's about 2% of the general fund budget. In looking at the programs that the city attorney provides, we looked at their top priority-based budgeting programs. Legal support and advisement was the greatest program that they provided in terms of budget dollars. It's a quartile 2 program. Council meeting support, $125,000 in quartile 2, and then I've listed the other programs that the city attorney provides and what quartile they were scored. Are there any questions regarding the city attorney's budget?
Questions? We're happy with those numbers? It looks like we are.
What was the percentage increase again?
The percentage increase over the prior year?
Right.
5%.
Okay. And is there a basis for that?
Potential rate increases, unexpected need for attorney advice, but just trying to be conservative.
Is that 5% over 2 years?
It's 5% over 2 years.
So 2.5%.
It's 2.5% a year.
I think the city attorney hasn't raised his rates, at least not since I've been here.
Oh, please don't give him ideas.
Well, sorry, he's already raised it. So it's definitely something he's already brought to my attention. So.
Okay, well.
All right, so I think we're happy with that. We appear to, Deputy Mayor? Oh, we're happy with that.
Okay, we'll go right to the public safety budget, and I'll let Pete take it from here.
And
don't forget to turn.
Joanne, what page are we looking at? I'm trying to find. I was able to find legal services.
The page in the budget.
Yeah.
116. 116.
116. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Presenting to you the public safety budget. As you know, public safety is provided to you as a contract from the King County Sheriff's Office. Our jail services are provided through a contract with SCORE, the South Correctional entity, as well as King County Jail. King County Jail is primarily for felony bookings. All misdemeanor bookings are done through SCORE. And our court services are provided through a contract with the King County Court System. Our preliminary budget for 2019-2020 is $9,183,991, which is a 4.29% increase over the 27-2018 budget, and that accounts for 33% of the general budget, or general fund, excuse me. Our FTEs with the department are unchanged. Position 1 chief, which is provided by a sergeant from the King County Sheriff's Office, 12 officers, and 1 detective, who is our burglary larceny detective.
So if we needed a SWAT team in here, or if we needed the major investigation unit, or we needed, that's in addition, or is that just
that is provided as part of the contractual service?
Thank you.
Our police
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Just a quick question. This is on the presentation on the budget highlights, the lower bullet. I think I'm happy, but I'm curious about the jail contract going down by 20%.
Yes.
What's that about?
So under the last 2-year biennium, we started a program where misdemeanor driving while suspended license warrants were allowed to sign basically a letter promising that they would appear in court. Our officers would take those warrant subjects, and if they met the criteria, we were able to set up a court date for them and not book them into the SCORE facility. So that has actually provided a savings to the city, which was the term escapes me, proposed or anticipated when the program was put into effect.
That's pretty cool. Question?
Hey, Councilman Marshall?
So we pay, or the city pays for jail time, pays the county. Is that right? The county then bills the city for the amount of time people do in jail. Is that right? Okay.
That is correct.
And are we still prosecuting DWS 3?
Yes, we are.
Okay. And do you happen to know if it's a policy of the prosecutor at all to dismiss DWS 3 cases if people get their licenses back?
Yes, the prosecutor does work with the courts, and the ultimate goal is to get people to get their driver's license back. So if the courts and the individual are able to work out an arrangement to do so, then yes, the prosecutor will defer that.
I don't see any others. If you want to continue, that'd be great. Or if you're done, that's okay too.
Just touching briefly, the 2020 budget, I believe I started, was $3,782,680, which is a 4% increase, and that include or plus set costs, and the set is the special enforcement team from Shoreline Precinct that we pay for on an as-needed basis. 2019 budget of $3,629,500 is 5% increase from 2018 plus set also. And the 2018 contract is $3,390,976. Continuing on with the budget highlights, the school resource officer funds are $50,000 per year, with $31,000 from North Shore School District provided straight to the city. Our court is $260,000 for 2 years for the biennium, which is a 4.2% decrease over the previous 2 years. And our job contract of $900,000 for 2 years is 19.87% decrease. Again, largely in part to the DWLS not having to book those into jail.
Councilmember Shrobnik?
So two things, and I don't know whether they have budget implications, but they may, so I figured I'd raise them. One is to explore obviously the diversion opportunities that you've already taken are cost savings. If there's a way to explore additional ones, I know other cities, Shoreline's working on some. There's other places in the county that are working on additional, kind of pushing the envelope on what can be diverted. So if there's a way to explore that. And something that we talked about, I think, a long time ago is whether there was an opportunity to either partner with council members or to do a separate kind of coffee with, I want to say coffee with cops, but I don't want to be insulting. Something like that. And again, I don't know whether that has cost implications. So
certainly something that we can look into.
City Manager, public safety, is that all of our property tax revenue now?
Maybe Joanne can help me out with that.
Pretty close to 100% of our property tax revenue is
our levy
gone to police
is
services.
over $4 million, pushing $5 million.
Yeah, we're about $5 million, and the property tax levy and all of public safety is 4.5. And we're counting jail and court and prosecutor and defender.
We're over. I said then we'd be over. Or that's including those.
That's included.
That's included.
That's including all those.
That's included.
Okay. Any other questions? Sure.
Are you on page 119?
Yes.
A lot of hamburgers.
And staff time. And organizing, promoting, attending. And it's not just chief,
It's overtime for my officers that are
different
assisting with the
officers.
event.
Mhm.
All right, any other questions? We okay with the police budget? I'm not seeing any disagreement here, so.
Just another thing is the prescription drug box drop-off there.
Yes.
On page 119. So it says it's 15 grand. So wait, I thought it was supposed to be free. So why is it 15 grand? The answer is priority-based budgeting counts all of our costs, including staff time. So our chief, on almost a daily basis, goes down to the box, picks up the drugs, takes them back upstairs, and then somebody transports them to Shoreline. So all that time is captured in priority-based budgeting.
Okay, now, Ostrom's has that service.
Oh, go ahead.
So you are correct, Mr. Mayor. Ostrom's does that service now. However, we still have to manage time checking on the box to make sure that it's not overflowing. Secure the box if it is, package up the box for Ostrom's to pick it up, advise them that it is full, and schedule
Here
it.
or Ostrom's?
Or, I'm sorry, not Ostrom's, but
Here.
Here.
Okay.
The contractor that picks up our narcotics and prescriptions.
But this captures all the time we spend throughout an entire year on it, and so that's why it's 15,000.
2 years, actually.
2 years?
Yeah, so 7,500
it says
a year. I mean,
20
that's not bad for the service it's providing.
Sorry.
But has any
I think
thought
it's
been
1 year.
given to allowing Ostrom's to take it over? I mean, I personally like it here, but the thought was that we would shift as much of that as we could to volunteer pharmacies that wanted to participate. So
I think that's a great idea. If there's private sector willing to step up and provide the service,
well, Ostrom's is providing the service.
Yeah, then
but
why are we
I still
doing
think
it
it's a good
here?
idea to have it here because there are people that like to come in here and dispose of them. I'm sure that box gets full.
It does.
And I'm sure there's people dumping stuff in there every day, which I would rather see it go here than down the drain.
Right.
So
I can appreciate it, and I appreciate the value of the program, but if the private sector is doing it, why don't we just put a sign on the box that says, take it to Ostrom's?
I think Ostrom's would appreciate the traffic.
Right.
I would certainly check with them, but I mean, I guess I wouldn't have heartburn over that because it's a way for them to get more customers through the door, so.
It's not like it's way out of the way either.
No, exactly.
Right.
It's not like it's what?
It's not like it's way out of the way. It's not like it's a big trip.
And I'm not sure whether Rite Aid has started pickup or not, but I know Ostrom jumped on the bandwagon the minute we passed it, so.
You know, this is a perfect example of talking about things in terms of PBB and opportunities to let other sectors of the economy
Right.
take over some of the things that are either costly or unnecessary for us to do. So I appreciate that discussion.
It doesn't necessarily save us $15,000 though, because you still have police officers, you still have the chief, but it frees his time up for other things.
It would certainly be worthwhile asking them, because I just don't want to automatically dump it on them.
Yeah.
So,
This is something we'd circle back to later on before we pass. Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Question here.
Yes.
And we had a brief detail. What is the junior high dance sponsorship? Is that time? Or?
It's time, providing them pizzas and soft drinks, organizing the DJ for the event.
Officers' time maybe contributes as a large part of that.
Yes, it is.
Right. Okay, I understand that.
All right, so if you can come back to us on that drug thing.
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Other than that, I think we're done with police. All right. Everybody want to
Go home.
go home? Call it a night?
I gotta say, I did drink
That could get us through one more department.
Yeah, I'm afraid we might turn into pumpkins here. Okay. Comments, whatever. Councilmember Smith. I see we lost Councilmember Curtis. No. Councilmember Marshall?
Nothing to add.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
Add.
Councilmember Danuski?
It is Kenmore Elementary Secret Santa time. Nobody's listening to me, though. So
We're listening. Secret Santa, big deal.
Okay. It's Kenmore Elementary Secret Santa time. I think I'm going to do it a little differently this year because the goal is to not have meetings in December, which means we wouldn't be doing the back and forth as we would in December. So I'm definitely going to get one kid for the council, and if people want to just give me some money for that, I'll share the letter, and I'll do the buying and the dropping off. If anybody wants one specifically just for themselves, let me know in the next couple weeks.
Oh. Okay. Before I go, Deputy Mayor, staff report. He's giving me funny looks.
See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow at 6.
What was that?
We'll see us tomorrow at 6.
Oh, yeah, 6. Deputy Mayor.
All right. I don't want to take up anybody's time, but I just passed down the draft ETP legislative priorities. I would ask that you all just give it, I'll email it out too. I'd ask you all just give it a quick look. We can flag anything, bring it back to me next week, and we can work on it then. I just want to make sure that we have general sign-off before we go to the November ETP meeting in a couple of weeks. So anyway, take a look at that between now and, say, Monday. Thank you.
And I have stuff, but it'll wait. If there's nothing else to come before us, we are adjourned. Stacy.
I know, I've got you.
What'd you get me?
I assumed you were going to say you wanted the Secret Santa kid, in which case.